Be patient. Little one, your mate will recognize your worth when the time is right. That's what Geraldine told herself through a decade of servitude. Through nights so cold she couldn't feel her fingers. Through humiliation so deep it carved scars into her soul. But Geraldine would learn that worth is determined by those in power, that recognition only comes to wolves born into the right families, and that her mate, the one person destined to see her truth, would take one look at her Omega rank and decide she was too pathetic to love, too weak to claim, too worthless to deserve even the mercy of a kind rejection. Some truths don't set you free. They shatter you so completely that even the pieces have pieces. And Geraldine Hester was about to discover that sometimes the moon goddess doesn't answer prayers, she ignites wars, crowns the broken, and teaches the powerful that they've been worshipping the wrong wolf all along. Chapter 1. Chains of Servitude. The Silver Pine Pack had a hierarchy as rigid as ancient oak, and Geraldine Hester had always existed at its very bottom, beneath the warriors, beneath the scouts, beneath even the elderly wolves who could no longer shift. She was Omega, the lowest rank, the wolf without worth. But that wasn't quite true, was it? Geraldine had worth. She cleaned the Alpha's manor until the marble floors gleamed like mirrors. She cooked meals for pack gatherings that fed over 300 wolves. She mended torn clothing and bandaged wounds, and scrubbed blood from training mats until her fingers bled. She had worth. She just wasn't valued. Geraldine. The sharp voice of Beth Good cut through the kitchen like a whip crack. Beth was the Alpha's daughter, blessed with golden hair that cascaded down her back like honey, green eyes that sparkled with perpetual amusement, and a cruelty that ran bone deep. The crystal goblets have water spots. Again. Do you enjoy making our family look poor? Geraldine kept her eyes lowered, her wolf whimpering inside her chest. I'm sorry, Miss Beth. I'll rewash them immediately. See that you do. Beth's perfectly manicured hand shot out, gripping Geraldine's chin and forcing her head up. The Omega flinched but didn't pull away. That would only make things worse. Beth's eyes narrowed as she studied Geraldine's face with the detached interest of someone examining a particularly ugly insect. You know, I almost pity you, 23 years old and still mateless. The moon goddess must have forgotten you exist. The words struck deeper than Beth could know. Every full moon, Geraldine had prayed, begged for her mate to reveal himself, to feel that legendary pull, that instant recognition that would transform her from worthless Omega to someone's beloved. But month after month, year after year, nothing. The goddess works in her own time, Geraldine whispered, the platitude tasting like ash on her tongue. Beth laughed, releasing her with a small shove that sent Geraldine stumbling backward into the counter. The goddess works in her own time. She mimicked in a high-pitched, mocking voice. You sound like a desperate old maid clinging to fairy tales. Face reality, Geraldine, you're broken, defective. No wolf wants a mate who can barely shift and has the backbone of a field mouse. The kitchen door swung open before Geraldine could respond, and her traitorous heart seized in her chest. Owen Kane stepped inside, and the entire world narrowed to just him. Owen was Beta of the Silver Pine Pack, second only to Alpha Blake Todd himself. He was everything Geraldine wasn't: powerful, confident, respected. His dark hair fell just past his ears, perpetually tousled as if he'd just come from a run through the forest. His eyes were the color of amber, sharp and intelligent. His body was all lean muscle and controlled strength, the kind of wolf who could kill an enemy without breaking a sweat. And he was Geraldine's mate. She'd known for exactly 48 hours. 2 days ago, during the full moon celebration, she'd been serving drinks when their eyes had met across the bonfire. The mate bond had snapped into place like a rubber band pulled too tight, and finally released a golden thread connecting her soul to his, thrumming with recognition and longing and rightness. She'd nearly dropped the tray of glasses. Her wolf had surged forward, desperate to run to him, to present herself, to finally claim what the moon goddess had promised her. But Owen's face had done something strange. His eyes had widened, his nostrils had flared as he scented her, and then, nothing. He'd turned away, walked off into the darkness as if she didn't exist. Geraldine had convinced herself she'd imagined his reaction. Maybe he'd been shocked. Maybe he needed time to process. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment to approach her privately, to sweep her into his arms and tell her that her suffering was over, that she'd never be alone again. 48 hours of maybe. Owen. Beth's voice turned syrupy sweet, her whole demeanor transforming in an instant. She pressed against him in a way that made Geraldine's wolf snarl with jealous rage. I didn't know you were stopping by. Are you here for father? Actually, Owen's voice was deep and smooth, the kind of voice that made Geraldine's knees weak despite herself. I'm here for Geraldine. Time stopped. Beth's mouth fell open. Geraldine's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. Hope desperate. Painful hope bloomed in her chest like a flower breaking through concrete. He was here for her. He'd come to claim her. The goddess hadn't forgotten. Geraldine. Owen's amber eyes met hers. And they were cold, completely, utterly cold. I need to speak with you. Alone. Beth looked between them, her face twisting with confusion and something that looked suspiciously like jealousy. Why would you need to speak with her alone? Pack business. Owen's tone left no room for argument. Leave us. For a moment Beth looked ready to protest. But even the Alpha's daughter didn't argue with the beta. She shot Geraldine a look of pure venom before stalking out, her designer shoes clicking sharply against the floor. The door closed. Silence filled the kitchen like smoke. Geraldine's hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron. Owen, I've been wanting to talk to you. Since the full moon, I know what you felt. He cut her off, his voice flat. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a thick envelope. Official pack letterhead. The kind used for important documents. Binding documents. Her wolf began to whimper. I'm not going to waste your time or mine with pretty speeches. Owen continued, setting the envelope on the counter between them like a barrier. You're my mate, I know it, you know it, the bond is real. Joy exploded in her chest. And I'm rejecting you. And died instantly, crushed under the weight of 3 words. What? The word barely made it past her lips. Owen's face remained impassive, as if he were discussing the weather rather than destroying her entire world. I, Owen Kane, beta of the Silver Pine Pack, formally reject you, Geraldine Hester, as my mate. These papers make it official. Sign them, and the bond will be severed completely. We'll both be free to find more suitable partners. Geraldine's vision blurred. But the moon goddess chose us. We're destined. Destiny made a mistake. His words were surgical, precise, designed to cut deep. Look at yourself, Geraldine. You're Omega, the lowest rank. You can barely shift without exhausting yourself. You have no family, no connections, no value to the pack beyond scrubbing floors. Did you really think I'd tie myself to that? To you? Each word was a knife between her ribs. I'm beta, he continued, his voice never rising, never showing emotion. I'll be alpha someday when Blake steps down. I need a mate who can stand beside me, who can lead, who can make the pack respect us. Not someone the entire pack sees as a servant. Not someone who makes me look weak. I could get stronger, Geraldine heard herself say, hating how small her voice sounded. I could train. I could. You can't change what you are. Owen picked up the envelope and held it out to her. Sign the papers, Geraldine. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Her hand shook as she took the envelope. Inside were official rejection documents, stamped with the pack seal. All it needed was her signature. And if I refuse? She didn't know where the question came from, some tiny spark of defiance that hadn't been completely extinguished. Owen's laugh was short and humorless. Then you suffer. The mate bond doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. You'll feel every moment I'm with someone else. Every time I touch another woman, you'll feel it like acid in your veins. Every time I eventually mark someone else as my chosen mate, you'll feel your soul tearing apart. Is that what you want? Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Why are you being so cruel? I'm not being cruel. I'm being practical. He pulled out a pen and set it beside the envelope. Sign, Geraldine. Accept reality. You were never meant for someone like me. The sooner you accept that, the sooner we can both move on. Her wolf was howling inside her, thrashing against the cage of her ribs, begging her not to do this. The mate bond, even newly formed, was already woven through her soul. Severing it would be like ripping out her own heart. But what choice did she have? Stay bonded to a man who looked at her with disgust? Feel him with other women? Watch him build a life with someone else while she withered away? Connected to someone who despised her existence? Geraldine picked up the pen. Her hand trembled so badly she could barely hold it. "Smart choice," Owen said. "And was that?" Relief in his voice. She pressed the pen to paper. The kitchen door burst open. "Beta Owen." A young warrior stumbled inside, his face flushed with excitement. "The Alpha King is here. King Marvin himself. He's arrived at the pack borders with his royal guard." Owen's face went pale. "The Alpha King? Here? Why wasn't I informed?" "He just arrived, sir. Alpha Blake is gathering the council now. He's requesting all high-ranking wolves present themselves immediately." Owen cursed under his breath, already moving toward the door. He paused, glancing back at Geraldine. "Sign those papers. Leave them on my desk. I'll finalize everything after the king's visit." Then he was gone. The door swinging shut behind him. Geraldine stood alone in the kitchen, rejection papers in one hand, pen in the other, her entire world crumbling around her ears. The Alpha King had come to Silverpine Pack, and she had a decision to make. Chapter 2. When Royalty Calls. Geraldine's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood in the kitchen for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, staring at the rejection papers spread across the counter like a death sentence. The pen felt heavy as lead in her grip. All she had to do was sign. 3 letters of her name, G, H, signature flourish, and it would be over. The mate bond would snap like a dried twig. She'd be free. Free to be alone forever, her wolf whispered bitterly. Free to watch him choose someone else. Free to die inside while pretending we're fine. "Stop it," Geraldine whispered to herself, to her wolf, to the empty kitchen. "Stop hoping." He made his choice. But her hand wouldn't move. The pen hovered over the signature line, trembling, as if her body was refusing to cooperate with what her mind knew had to be done. A commotion outside the kitchen window drew her attention. Through the glass, she could see the pack grounds transforming into chaos. Wolves rushed in every direction, warriors straightening their uniforms, high-ranking members smoothing their clothing, scouts running messages back and forth. The entire pack was mobilizing, because the Alpha King had arrived. Geraldine had never seen King Marvin Coffee in person. Few wolves had. He ruled over all the packs in the territory from his seat of power 300 miles north, a figure more legend than reality. Stories painted him as ruthlessly powerful, dangerously intelligent, and absolutely merciless to those who disrespected pack law. Why would someone like that come to Silverpine Pack unannounced? "Not your concern," she told herself firmly. "You're Omega. Whatever business the king has here, it has nothing to do with you." She looked back down at the papers, picked up the pen again. This time, she pressed it to paper, and began to write. "Geraldine." Beth's shriek from somewhere in the manor made her jump, the pen skittering across the page and leaving an ugly ink slash across the document. "Geraldine, get out here right now." Dread pooled in Geraldine's stomach. She quickly shoved the papers back into the envelope and tucked it into her apron pocket. She'd finish this later, in private, where no one could watch her heart break, and hurried out of the kitchen. She found Beth in the main foyer, surrounded by 4 other high-ranking she-wolves, all of them in various states of panic. "There you are." Beth grabbed Geraldine's arm hard enough to bruise. "The king is coming to the manor. Here. To our home. Everything needs to be perfect. The grand hall needs to be prepared for a formal audience. Refreshments need to be prepared." And she thrust a basket into Geraldine's hands. "Someone needs to gather fresh nightshade and wolfsbane from the garden for the ceremonial table arrangements." Geraldine blinked. "Nightshade and wolfsbane? But those are symbolic," Beth snapped. "They represent strength and immunity to poison. It's traditional for Alpha King visits. Obviously you wouldn't know that, being Omega. But try to keep up. The garden. Now, don't come back until you have enough for 12 arrangements." Before Geraldine could respond, Beth had already turned away, barking orders at the other she-wolves about proper bowing techniques and formal address protocols. Geraldine clutched the basket and slipped out the side door, grateful for the escape. The garden was located at the far edge of the manor grounds, a sprawling piece of land where the pack grew both medicinal herbs and decorative flowers. It was Geraldine's favorite place in Silverpine, the only place where no one bothered her, where she could breathe without someone criticizing how she did it. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the grounds. In the distance, she could see a massive motorcade of black vehicles pulling up to the main courtyard. The Alphaking's convoy. Even from here, she could feel the power radiating from those vehicles. The kind of concentrated dominance that made her wolf want to bare her throat in submission. She turned away quickly and headed into the garden. The nightshade was easy to find, tall stalks with bell-shaped purple flowers that were beautiful and deadly in equal measure. She carefully cut several stems, placing them in her basket. The wolfsbane took longer to locate, tucked away in the shadier corner of the garden where the most dangerous plants grew. She was reaching for a particularly full stalk when she felt it. A pull. Not the mate bond that was a specific, targeted sensation. A golden thread connecting her to Owen. This was something different. Bigger. Like a compass needle suddenly spinning wildly, trying to orient itself to a magnetic north that hadn't existed moments before. Geraldine froze, her hand hovering over the wolfsbane. Her wolf was awake. Alert. Every sense suddenly sharpened to an almost painful degree. "What is that? Careful with that one," a deep voice said from behind her. "Wolfsbane, that mature can burn even through gloves if you're not cautious." Geraldine spun around so fast she nearly dropped her basket. A man stood at the garden's entrance, backlit by the setting sun so she couldn't see his face clearly. But she could see his silhouette tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that seemed to fill the entire garden despite him standing perfectly still. I'm sorry," she stammered, her Omega instincts screaming at her to lower her eyes, to submit, to apologize for existing. "I didn't realize anyone was. I'm just gathering flowers for the ceremonial arrangements," the man finished, stepping forward into better light. "Traditional, respectful. Your Alpha knows protocol." Geraldine's breath caught. He was devastating. Not handsome in the way Owen was handsome. Owen was beautiful. Polished, perfect. This man was raw power carved into human form. His hair was dark, almost black, cut short in a military style. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, a jaw that looked like it could break stone. His eyes were the most striking thing about him, pale gray, like storm clouds, and so intense that meeting them felt like touching a live wire. He wore all black, expensive, tailored clothing that screamed authority and wealth, and around his neck, Geraldine's eyes widened. A thick silver chain with a pendant bearing the royal seal. "Oh no. Oh no. She couldn't finish the sentence. "Marvin Coffee," he said simply, as if announcing he was the Alpha King was no more significant than mentioning the weather. "And you are?" Her mouth had gone completely dry. She dropped into a clumsy curtsy, nearly losing her grip on the basket. "G. Geraldine Hester. Your Majesty. Omega of Silverpine Pack. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I should have recognized. I'll leave immediately." "Stay." The command was quiet but absolute. Geraldine's body obeyed before her mind could process it, freezing in place. King Marvin moved closer, his footsteps silent despite his size. He was studying her with those storm-gray eyes, his expression unreadable. "You're the one they have gathering poisonous plants alone? No supervision? No protective gear?" I've done this many times, Your Majesty. I'm careful." "Careful." He repeated the word as if tasting it. "And if you were to make a mistake? If you were to absorb too much through your skin? Who would notice? Who would care?" The questions struck harder than they should have. Because the answer was obvious. No one. Geraldine swallowed hard. "I'm Omega, Your Majesty. This is what I do. What I'm useful for." Something flickered across his face. Anger? Disgust? It was gone too quickly for her to identify. "Is that what they've taught you?" His voice had gone dangerously soft. "That you're only as valuable as your rank?" She didn't know how to answer that. Because yes, that was exactly what she'd been taught. What she'd internalized so deeply. It was practically written on her bones. King Marvin reached past her, his arm brushing her shoulder, sending an electric jolt through her entire body, and plucked the wolfsbane stem she'd been reaching for. His hands were bare. The poisonous plant should have burned him instantly. It didn't. He held it up to the fading light, examining it with the casual interest of someone who had nothing to fear from poison or pain. Aconitum lycoctonum. Beautiful, deadly, and completely harmless if you know how to handle it properly. He placed the stem carefully in her basket, then met her eyes again. The world tilted. That pull she'd felt earlier, that strange, overwhelming magnetic sensation intensified 100-fold. Her wolf threw itself against her consciousness, desperate and confused and yearning for something she couldn't name. "Your Majesty." A sharp voice cut through the moment. Owen Kane appeared at the garden entrance, slightly out of breath, his expression caught between respect and barely concealed irritation. "We've been looking everywhere for you. Alpha Blake has prepared the formal greeting in the Grand Hall." "I'm aware." King Marvin didn't look away from Geraldine. "I was introducing myself to Miss Hester." Owen's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, realization, horror. "Geraldine is just our Omega." "Your Majesty. She doesn't need to be included in. I'll decide what I need." The temperature in the garden seemed to drop 10 degrees. King Marvin finally turned to look at Owen, and Geraldine watched her almost former mate actually take a step backward. "You're Beta Owen Kane, correct?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good. I'll want to speak with you privately later. I have some questions about Silverpine Pack's structure." His gaze flickered to Geraldine, then back to Owen. "Among other things." Owen's jaw tightened. "Of course, Your Majesty. Whatever you need." "Miss Hester." King Marvin turned back to her, and his voice gentled slightly. "Finish gathering your flowers, then come to the Grand Hall. I want you present for the formal audience." Geraldine's mind went blank. "Your Majesty, I don't think I'm not supposed to." "Consider it a royal command." The corner of his mouth twitched. Was that almost a smile? "I suspect this pack meeting will concern you more than you realize." Then he was walking away, Owen scrambling to keep pace beside him, leaving Geraldine alone in the garden with a basket full of poison and a heart full of questions she didn't dare ask. What was happening? Why had the Alphaking spoken to her to an Omega like she mattered? And why, when he'd stood close to her, had her wolf reacted like, no, that was impossible. Geraldine looked down at her apron pocket, where the rejection papers were still tucked away, unsigned. Something told her that before this night was over, her entire world was going to change. She just didn't know if it would be for better or worse. Chapter 3: Shattered Illusions. The Grand Hall of Silverpine Pack Manor was a monument to wealth and power that the pack couldn't quite afford. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, their light reflecting off polished marble floors. Tapestries depicting ancient wolf legends lined the walls. Victories in battle, legendary alphas, the moon goddess herself blessing the packs with her silver light. Geraldine had cleaned this room 1,000 times. She knew every corner, every shadow, every place where dust liked to hide. She'd never been allowed inside during an actual formal gathering. Now she stood near the back wall, clutching her empty basket, feeling like an imposter. Around her, the high-ranking wolves of Silverpine Pack had assembled, warriors in their dress uniforms, council members in expensive suits, the Alpha's family in clothing that probably cost more than Geraldine earned in a year. And every single one of them kept shooting her confused, hostile looks. What is the Omega doing here? Why isn't she in the kitchen where she belongs? Who gave her permission to attend? Beth Good stood near the front with her father, Alpha Blake Todd, and she looked ready to commit murder. Her green eyes kept darting to Geraldine, promising retribution later for this breach of protocol. Geraldine wanted to disappear into the floor. All rise for His Majesty, Alphaking Marvin Coffey, ruler of the Northern Territories, first among Alphas, keeper of pack law. The formal announcement came from a royal guard, a massive wolf with scars across his face and eyes that had seen too much violence. The entire room rose as one. Heads bowed in respect. King Marvin entered the Grand Hall, and the temperature seemed to drop. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his presence filling the space like smoke. 2 royal guards flanked him, but they were unnecessary. No one in this room would dare challenge him. His storm-gray eyes swept across the assembled wolves with the detached interest of someone evaluating potential threats. When his gaze landed on Geraldine, hidden in the back, it lingered for just a moment, then moved on. Alpha Blake, King Marvin's voice carried effortlessly across the hall. Thank you for receiving me on such short notice. Blake Todd stepped forward, bowing deeply. He was a handsome wolf in his 50s, silver threading through his dark hair, his build still strong despite his age. Your Majesty, Silverpine Pack is honored by your presence. Our home is yours. Whatever you need, I need information. King Marvin cut him off, with surgical precision. And I need honesty. Can you provide both? A ripple of tension spread through the room. Blake's smile faltered slightly. Of course, Your Majesty. Silverpine Pack has always been loyal to the crown. We have nothing to hide. Good. King Marvin settled into the ornate chair that had been prepared for him, essentially a throne, Geraldine noted and steepled his fingers. Then let's begin with a simple question. How many Omegas does your pack currently have? The question hung in the air like a blade. Blake blinked, clearly confused by the inquiry. Omegas, Your Majesty? We have, let me think, perhaps 15, 20? They're not exactly tracked with the same detail as our warriors, or 15 or 20? King Marvin's voice had gone dangerously soft. You don't know the exact number of your lowest-ranking pack members? With respect, Your Majesty, Owen Kane stepped forward, his voice smooth and diplomatic. Omegas come and go. Some leave to join other packs, some don't survive the winter months. Keeping precise records would be basic pack management. King Marvin's eyes locked onto Owen, and Geraldine saw her almost former mate pale slightly. Every wolf in a pack, regardless of rank, should be documented, protected, valued. Or have the old laws changed without my knowledge? The room had gone deathly silent. Alpha Blake cleared his throat. Your Majesty, I assure you, we follow all pack laws to the letter. Our Omegas are provided, for they have shelter, food, work. King Marvin stood, and the movement was so sudden that several wolves near him flinched. Tell me, Alpha Blake, what kind of work do your Omegas perform? They handle domestic duties, cleaning, cooking, maintenance, gathering poisonous plants without protective gear? Blake's face went blank. I'm not sure I understand. I found one of your Omegas in the garden earlier, King Marvin said, his voice carrying an edge that made Geraldine's skin prickle with warning. Alone, handling wolfsbane and nightshade with bare hands. When I asked her about safety protocols, she seemed confused by the concept of her own well-being mattering. Every eye in the room turned to look at Geraldine. She wanted to die. Beth's face had gone red with fury. Owen looked like he'd swallowed glass. Alpha Blake was clearly trying to calculate how to spin this in a way that didn't make his pack look negligent. Your Majesty, Blake said carefully, Geraldine is one of our more experienced Omegas. She's been handling those plants for years without incident. We trust her competence. You trust her competence, but don't bother learning if there are 15 or 20 Omegas total in your pack. King Marvin's eyebrows rose fractionally. Interesting logic. The temperature in the room kept dropping. Blake was sweating now. Geraldine could see it. Your Majesty, if there's been some breach of protocol, I assure you it was unintentional. Silverpine Pack has always what? Always treated your Omegas as disposable? Always operated under the assumption that low rank equals low value? King Marvin began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back, every inch the judge delivering a verdict. Tell me, Alpha Blake, are you familiar with the Treaty of Silver Moon? Blake hesitated. The ancient treaty? Your Majesty, that was signed over 300 years ago, and still legally binding. King Marvin stopped pacing, turning to face the Alpha directly. The Treaty of Silver Moon, signed by the first Alpha King and representatives of all packs, explicitly states that every wolf, regardless of rank, is entitled to basic dignity, protection, and the opportunity to reach their full potential. It's the foundation of pack law. Yes, Your Majesty, but you've been violating it. The words dropped like stones into still water. Systematically. For years, the room erupted into chaos. Wolves began speaking over each other, Protests and denials and confused questions all blending together into noise. Alpha Blake's face had gone from red to white. Beth looked like she was about to faint. Owen's jaw was clenched so tight Geraldine thought she heard his teeth crack. King Marvin raised one hand. Instant silence. "I'm not here to punish you," he said, though his tone suggested punishment was absolutely on the table. "I'm here to investigate. There have been reports, complaints from Omegas who left Silverpine and sought refuge in other packs. Stories of mistreatment, neglect, and systemic abuse. Lies," Beth burst out, then immediately clamped her hand over her mouth when her father shot her a murderous look. King Marvin's attention swiveled to her with the precision of a predator spotting prey. "Lies? Tell me, miss." "Beth Good, your majesty," she said, dropping into a curtsy that was far too elaborate. "Alpha Blake's daughter, and future maid of our beta." Geraldine's stomach dropped. Future maid of our beta. She looked at Owen, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I see," King Marvin said slowly. "And you believe these reports of mistreatment are fabricated?" "Of course, your majesty." Beth's voice had taken on a pleading quality. "Our Omegas are perfectly happy. They have everything they need. Some wolves are just ungrateful. They leave and make up stories because they couldn't handle honest work." Honest work. King Marvin's voice could have frozen water. Such as handling deadly poison without protection? Working 16-hour days without breaks? Sleeping in unheated servant quarters during winter? Beth's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Your Majesty." Owen stepped forward, and Geraldine felt the mate bond flare with his proximity, that golden thread still connecting them, throbbing with unspoken tension. "I think there may be some misunderstanding about how Silverpine operates. We're a traditional pack. We follow the old ways. Omegas serve, and in return they receive." "Receive what?" King Marvin interrupted. "Scraps? The privilege of existing on the margins? The honor of being invisible unless someone needs their floors cleaned?" Owen's face flushed. "With respect, your majesty, not all wolves are meant to lead. Some are born to serve. That's the natural order." "The natural order," King Marvin said, his voice dropping to something that was almost a growl, "is that every wolf has value. Every wolf deserves respect. And every wolf has the right to discover their true potential, not have it crushed under the weight of arbitrary hierarchy." He turned, and his eyes found Geraldine again across the crowded room. "Miss Hester, come here." Terror seized her heart. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to run, to do anything but draw more attention to herself. "But you didn't refuse an Alpha King." Geraldine moved through the crowd on shaking legs. Wolves parted around her like she carried disease. She could feel their stares, their judgment, their confusion about why the king cared about someone like her. She stopped in front of King Marvin and dropped to her knees, head bowed, exposing her neck in the ultimate gesture of submission. "Please stand," he said softly. She looked up, startled. "Stand, Miss Hester. I'm not going to hurt you." Slowly, she rose on trembling legs, keeping her eyes downcast. "Look at me," King Marvin commanded gently. She did. Those storm-gray eyes held hers, and she felt it again, that strange pull, that magnetic force that made her wolf howl with recognition, even though it made no sense, even though it was impossible. "Tell me," King Marvin said, and his voice was for her alone despite the 100 wolves listening. "Do you feel valued in this pack?" The question was so unexpected, so genuine, that tears burned behind her eyes. Her voice cracked. "I have a place here, your majesty. I have work. That's not what I asked." His eyes softened fractionally. "Do you feel valued? Not tolerated. Not useful. Valued." The truth lodged in her throat like a stone. No. She'd never felt valued. Not once. Not ever. But saying that out loud, in front of Alpha Blake, in front of Beth, in front of Owen, who was standing right there with his future mate at his side. "Answer honestly," King Marvin said. "No one will punish you for honesty. You have my word." Geraldine's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "No," she whispered. The word fell into silence like a confession. "No," she said again, louder this time, something breaking open inside her chest. I don't feel valued. I feel like I'm furniture. Like I only matter when someone needs something from me. Like if I disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice except to complain about who would clean the manor. Beth gasped. Alpha Blake's face went purple. Owen looked like he wanted to drag her out of the room. But King Marvin smiled. It was a small smile, barely there. But it transformed his harsh face into something almost gentle. Thank you for your honesty, Miss Hester. He turned to address the room. This is what I'm talking about. This is the rot that's infected too many packs, the idea that some wolves matter less than others, that rank determines worth. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a scroll sealed with silver wax bearing the royal crest. I'm invoking my authority as Alpha King, he announced, his voice ringing through the hall with absolute finality. Effective immediately, Silver Pine Pack is under investigation for systematic mistreatment of lower-ranked wolves. I'll be conducting interviews with every Omega in this pack. I'll be reviewing your records, your housing arrangements, your work assignments, and I'll be determining if this pack is fit to remain autonomous, or if it requires direct royal oversight. The room exploded again, protests, denials, panic. Alpha Blake stumbled forward. Your Majesty, please. This is unprecedented. We've done nothing wrong. You can't just... I can. King Marvin's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. And I am. His eyes found Geraldine's one more time. Miss Hester, you're coming with me. I have questions about your treatment here, and I want answers in private where you don't have to fear retribution. Your Majesty. Owen's voice was strained, desperate in a way Geraldine had never heard before. Geraldine is. She's my concern. I'll speak for her. She has a voice of her own. King Marvin's tone could have cut steel. And I'm interested in hearing it. Dismiss her from your mind. Beta Cain. You have bigger problems to worry about. He offered Geraldine his arm like she was someone important, someone worth escorting, someone who mattered. She stared at it for a long moment, unable to process what was happening. Then, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand on his arm. The moment they touched, that pull intensified into something overwhelming. And deep in her apron pocket, the unsigned rejection papers seemed to burn like they were on fire. Chapter 4. Private Revelations. King Marvin led Geraldine through the manor, with the confidence of someone who owned every space he entered. His royal guards flanked them at a respectful distance, their presence a silent reminder that this was not a request, it was a royal command. Behind them, Geraldine could hear the chaos continuing in the grand hall. Alpha Blake's raised voice, Beth's hysteria, the confused murmuring of pack members trying to understand how their world had just been turned upside down in the span of 20 minutes. She couldn't think about them right now. All she could focus on was the feeling of her hand resting on King Marvin's arm, the heat radiating through the expensive fabric of his jacket, the solid strength of the muscle beneath, and that pull that wouldn't stop intensifying with every step they took together. What was wrong with her? She was mated to Owen. The bond was still there, still connecting them. Even if it was about to be severed, she shouldn't be feeling anything for anyone else. And yet, in here, King Marvin said, opening the door to Alpha Blake's private study. It was a room Geraldine had only entered to clean mahogany furniture, leather-bound books, a massive desk that screamed authority. He gestured for her to enter first, then followed, closing the door firmly behind them. The guards remained outside. They were alone. Geraldine's heart hammered against her ribs. She moved to the center of the room, then turned to face him, keeping her eyes lowered respectfully. Your Majesty, I don't understand what's happening. Why am I? Sit. He gestured to one of the leather chairs near the fireplace. She blinked. Your Majesty. I couldn't possibly, that's not. Geraldine. The way he said her name firm but not unkind made her wolf perk up with interest. Please sit. We need to talk, and I'd prefer you not spend the entire conversation looking like you're about to bolt. Slowly, feeling like she was breaking 1,000 unspoken rules, Geraldine lowered herself into the chair. The leather was buttery soft, probably more expensive than everything she owned combined. King Marvin took the chair across from her, leaning back in a way that should have looked casual but somehow still radiated contained power. He studied her for a long moment, those storm-gray eyes cataloging details she couldn't begin to guess at. Tell me about your life here, he finally said. The truth. Not what you think I want to hear. not what would protect your alpha. The actual truth. Geraldine's throat went dry. I don't know what you want me to say, Your Majesty. Start with the basics. Where do you sleep? The question was so simple, so mundane, that it caught her off guard. In the servant quarters. Behind the kitchen. There are 8 of us in one room, 4 sets of bunk beds. Heating? We share blankets. Sometimes the kitchen stove stays warm enough that we can feel it through the wall. His jaw tightened fractionally. And you're paid for your work? Geraldine almost laughed. Omegas don't get paid, Your Majesty. We receive room and board in exchange for service. That's how it's always been. How many hours do you work each day? She had to think about it. I wake at 4 in the morning to start breakfast preparation. I usually finish cleaning after dinner, around 10 or 11 at night, sometimes later if there's a pack event, 17 to 19 hours a day. His voice had gone flat. 7 days a week? Omegas don't get days off, Your Majesty. The work doesn't stop. And medical care? If you're injured or ill? We take care of each other. There's an older Omega, she knows some healing herbs. We make do. You make do. He repeated the words like they tasted bitter. You work 19 hours a day, 7 days a week, sleep in unheated quarters, receive no pay, and have no access to proper medical care. Is that accurate? When he said it like that, laid out in stark terms, it sounded wrong. But it was just how things were. How they'd always been. It's not as bad as it sounds, Your Majesty, she found herself saying, though she wasn't sure why she was defending Silverpine. We have food. We have shelter. Some packs don't even take in Omegas at all. Some packs violate pack law more egregiously than others. He corrected sharply. That doesn't make this acceptable. He stood abruptly, moving to the fireplace, staring into the cold hearth like he could see something there she couldn't. The Treaty of Silver Moon was created for a reason, Geraldine. 300 years ago, packs were tearing themselves apart from the inside. Alphas were treating lower-ranked wolves as slaves. Omegas were dying in droves from overwork and neglect. The wolf population was collapsing. He turned to look at her, and there was something ancient in his eyes, something that spoke of responsibilities that weighed heavier than mountains. The first Alphaking brought the packs together and made them swear an oath. Every wolf, regardless of rank, would be treated with basic dignity. Every wolf would have the opportunity to discover their true potential. Every wolf would be valued for more than just their utility. But that's idealistic, Your Majesty, Geraldine said quietly. In reality, some wolves are stronger than others. Some are born to lead. Some are born to serve. That's just nature. Is it? He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space between them. Tell me. Geraldine, have you ever been trained to fight? She shook her head. Ever been taught pack history? Strategy? Politics? No, Your Majesty. Those classes are only for ranked wolves. Ever been allowed to participate in pack runs? Hunt with the warriors? Train your wolf form beyond basic shifting? Omegas aren't permitted. She stopped, realizing what he was doing. King Marvin nodded slowly. Exactly. You've been told your entire life that you're weak, that you're lesser, that you're only good for serving. But you've never been given a single opportunity to be anything else. How can you know your true potential when every door has been closed before you even approached it? The words hit like physical blows. Geraldine had spent 23 years accepting her place in the world. Accepting that she was Omega because she was meant to be Omega. That the moon goddess had made her this way for a reason. But what if? What if she'd been made small by circumstance, not by nature? Your Majesty, she whispered. Even if that's true, what difference does it make? I'm 23 years old. I've spent my entire adult life as an Omega. I don't know how to be anything else. You're 23. His voice softened. Wolves live for centuries if they're not killed first. You have time. Geraldine, you have so much time to become whoever you're meant to be. He crouched down in front of her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. The movement was so unexpected, so shockingly informal for an Alphaking that she couldn't breathe. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. And I need you to listen without panicking. Dread pooled in her stomach. Your Majesty, when I arrived at Silverpine's borders this afternoon, I felt something. A pull, a connection I haven't felt in a very long time. His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. It led me here. To this pack. To you. No. No. Your Majesty, I can't. I know you're mated, he said, and pain flickered across his face so quickly she almost missed it. I can smell the bond on you. Recent. Newly formed. And. His eyes narrowed. Rejected? Geraldine's hand flew to her apron pocket where the papers were still tucked away, unsigned. King Marvin's expression went from concerned to furious in the span of a heartbeat. Someone rejected you. It's complicated. Who? The single word was a command that bypassed her brain and went straight to her mouth. Owen Kane. The beta. He gave me papers. Today. He wants me to sign them so the bond can be severed officially. King Marvin stood so abruptly that Geraldine flinched. He turned away from her, his shoulders rigid with barely contained rage. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. Let me understand this correctly. Owen Kane discovered you were his mate, his goddess-chosen partner, and instead of claiming you, protecting you, cherishing you, he rejected you. He said I would make him look weak, Geraldine heard herself say. That he needs a mate who can stand beside him as future alpha. Someone with rank and power, and he's right, Your Majesty. I'm not what a beta needs. Stop. King Marvin whirled back to face her, and the fury in his eyes was breathtaking. Don't you dare defend him. Don't you dare internalize his cowardice as you're failing. He moved back to her, gripping the arms of her chair, caging her in. His face was inches from hers. You are not weak. You are not lesser. And any male who would reject his goddess-chosen mate because of pack politics is not worthy of the title wolf. Let alone beta. Geraldine couldn't look away from him, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Have you signed the papers yet? He demanded. No. I was going to, but then you arrived. And, don't. The command was absolute. Don't sign anything until we've had more time to talk. But why? Tears were burning in her eyes now. All the emotion of the past 3 days threatening to overflow. Why do you care? You're the Alpha King. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. Why are you? Because, he said, and his voice dropped to something raw and honest and terrifying. I think the moon goddess has a twisted sense of humor. I think she's been playing a very long game. And I think you and I need to figure out exactly what she's planning before either of us makes a decision we can't take back. A knock at the door interrupted them. King Marvin pulled back, his professional mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. Enter. One of his guards opened the door. Your Majesty, Alpha Blake is requesting an audience. He's insistent. I'm sure he is. King Marvin straightened his jacket. Tell him I'll speak with him in 10 minutes. I'm not finished here. The guard nodded and closed the door. King Marvin turned back to Geraldine, and his expression had shifted again, still intense, but more controlled. I have a proposition for you. A proposition? Stay at the manor tonight as my guest, not as a servant. I'm commandeering one of the guest suites for you, a proper room with heat and privacy. Tomorrow, I want to begin formal interviews with all the Omegas in Silverpine Pack. I want you to help me. Geraldine stared at him. Your Majesty, I can't. The other Omegas won't talk honestly in front of me. I'm one of them. They'll think I'm trying to get them in trouble. Then help me earn their trust. Be my liaison. Show them that I'm serious about making changes, about enforcing pack law, about giving them the dignity they deserve. But why me? There are other Omegas who are older, more respected. Because you were honest with me, he said simply. In front of your entire pack, despite the consequences, you told the truth. That takes courage. And courage is exactly what I need right now. He offered her his hand. Will you help me, Geraldine Hester? She stared at his outstretched hand like it was a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. Everything in her life had taught her to stay small, stay quiet, stay in her place. Accepting this, helping the Alpha King investigate her own pack, would make her a target. Beth would hate her even more. Alpha Blake might try to have her exiled. Owen had already rejected her. What did she have to lose? Slowly, Geraldine placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, that pull flared so intensely that she gasped. Her wolf surged forward, recognizing something, demanding something, and King Marvin's eyes flashed gold. Not the normal amber gold of a wolf's eyes. Pure molten gold. The color of royalty. The color of power that shouldn't exist. He pulled his hand back quickly, but not before she saw the shock on his face, as if he'd felt it too, whatever that was. "Your Majesty?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Get some rest tonight," he said, his voice slightly unsteady. "We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. And Geraldine?" "Yes, Your Majesty?" "Don't sign those papers, promise me." She should ask why. She should demand an explanation. She should do 100 things that a smart, self-preserving wolf would do. Instead, she nodded. "I promise." His shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Good. Now let's get you settled before Alpha Blake breaks down the door. I have a feeling he and I are going to have a very long, very unpleasant conversation about how he runs his pack." As they moved toward the door, Geraldine's hand drifted back to her apron pocket. To the rejection papers that would sever her bond with Owen forever. Papers she'd almost signed. Papers she'd been desperate to sign just hours ago. Now, with the Alpha King's command still ringing in her ears and that inexplicable pull thrumming between them like a living thing, she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. The only thing she knew for certain was that her life had just become infinitely more complicated, and somewhere deep inside, her wolf was howling with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Chapter 5. The investigation begins. The guest suite King Marvin had commandeered for Geraldine was larger than the entire servant quarters she shared with 7 other Omegas. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the room, draped in silk curtains the color of moonlight. Plush carpet covered the floor carpet she'd cleaned a dozen times but never been allowed to walk on with bare feet. A fireplace crackled with actual warmth, not the distant suggestion of heat filtering through kitchen walls. And the bathroom. Geraldine stood in the doorway of the bathroom, staring at the clawfoot tub like it was a mythical creature. Hot running water. Soap that smelled like lavender instead of harsh lye. Towels so soft they felt like clouds. She'd spent her entire life cleaning rooms like this. She'd never imagined sleeping in one. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Hester?" A female voice, unfamiliar. "His Majesty sent me to assist you. May I enter?" Geraldine crossed to the door and opened it to find a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to serving royalty. She carried an armful of clothing. "I'm Nora Woods, His Majesty's personal attendant," the woman said with a warm smile. "He thought you might need some proper clothing. These should fit. I'm quite good at estimating sizes." She swept into the room and laid the clothing across the bed. 3 outfits, all in soft fabrics and neutral colors, simple but well made. The kind of clothing ranked wolves wore. "I couldn't possibly," Geraldine started. "His Majesty insists." Nora's smile was gentle but firm. "He also wanted me to tell you that dinner will be brought to your room. He thought you might prefer to eat in private tonight, rather than face the packed dining hall." The relief that flooded through Geraldine was almost embarrassing. The thought of sitting in the dining hall, with every wolf staring at her, judging her, whispering about how the Omega had gotten above herself. "That's very kind of His Majesty," she managed. Nora studied her for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "He speaks highly of you, you know. Said you were brave. The king doesn't use that word lightly." "Brave." Geraldine almost laughed. She'd spent the entire encounter with King Marvin terrified, unsure, barely able to string sentences together. "I should let you rest," Nora said, moving toward the door. "But Miss Hester?" "One more thing." "Yes?" "His Majesty has a gift for seeing people as they truly are, not as the world has labeled them. If he says you're brave, if he says you matter, believe him. He's never wrong about these things." Then she was gone, leaving Geraldine alone with her thoughts, and a room that felt like a dream she'd wake from at any moment. She moved to the bed and picked up one of the outfit's soft gray pants and a cream-colored sweater. Her fingers trembled as she touched the fabric. In her apron pocket, the dirty, stained apron she was still wearing, the rejection papers crinkled. Geraldine pulled them out and stared at the documents. Owen's signature was already there, bold and decisive. All it needed was hers. "Don't sign them," King Marvin had said. "Promise me." Why? What possible reason could the Alpha King have for caring whether she severed a bond with a beta who'd rejected her? Unless… No. That was insane. She was reading too much into his kindness, into that strange pull she'd felt. He was trying to help her because he was a good king who enforced pack law. Nothing more. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Dinner, Miss Hester," a male voice called. She opened the door to find a young servant, not an Omega, she noted, but an actual ranked pack member assigned to serving duties holding a covered tray. He looked deeply uncomfortable. "Where should I?" He gestured vaguely at the room. "Oh, the table by the window?" Geraldine suggested, feeling ridiculous. She'd never directed anyone before. She was the one who carried trays. He set it down quickly and practically fled. Geraldine approached the tray like it might bite her. When she lifted the cover, her breath caught. Roasted chicken with herbs. Fresh vegetables, still steaming. Bread that looked homemade and still warm. A small dessert that looked like chocolate mousse. This was the kind of meal served to alpha families. Not to Omegas who ate leftovers in the kitchen after everyone else had finished. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since. When? This morning? Earlier? She sat down. Actually sat at the table like a person, not crouched on the floor or standing while she ate and took a bite. It was delicious. It was warm, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Geraldine ate until she was full. The next morning arrived too quickly. Geraldine woke to sunlight streaming through actual windows, not the basement slits that passed for windows in the servant quarters. For a moment she forgot where she was, panic seizing her chest as she registered the unfamiliar surroundings. Then it all came flooding back. The Alphaking. The investigation. The promise she'd made. She washed using the bathroom's running water, hot water, luxury beyond measure, and dressed in the clothes Nora had brought. The gray pants fit perfectly. The cream sweater was soft against her skin. She caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror and froze. She looked different. Not transformed. Not suddenly beautiful or powerful. But different. The clothes made her look less like a servant and more like a person. Someone who might matter. Another knock at the door. This time it was Nora again, along with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Miss Hester. His Majesty requests your presence in the library in 1 hour. He's begun interviewing the Omegas." Geraldine's stomach clenched. "Already? He doesn't waste time." Nora set down the tray, more food than Geraldine would normally eat in 2 days. "He's already spoken with 4 of them. He wants you there for the rest." An hour later, Geraldine found herself standing outside the library, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could hear voices inside. King Marvin's deep, measured tone. And another voice, Tanya Tanner, one of the older Omegas who'd been with Silverpine for decades. "You can go in," one of the royal guards said, opening the door for her. The library was another room Geraldine had cleaned but never truly entered. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. King Marvin sat in a leather chair near the window, a notebook in his lap. Tanya sat across from him, her weathered hands folded in her lap, her expression guarded. Both looked up when Geraldine entered. "Ah, Geraldine." "Good." King Marvin gestured to a chair beside him. "Tanya and I were just discussing the sleeping arrangements. Please, join us." Geraldine sat, acutely aware of Tanya's suspicious gaze. "Tanya," King Marvin continued, "I was explaining to you that these interviews are confidential. Nothing you tell me will be shared with Alpha Blake or anyone else in pack leadership. I'm here to understand the truth. Not to punish honesty." Tanya's lips pressed into a thin line. "With respect, Your Majesty, we've heard that before. Tell us the truth, we just want to help." Then the moment the fancy wolves leave, anyone who spoke up gets reminded of their place. "I understand your hesitation." King Marvin's voice was patient. "That's why I wanted Geraldine here. She's one of you. She knows what you've experienced. And I'm asking her to vouch for me to help you understand that I'm serious about making changes." Tanya looked at Geraldine, her eyes searching. "Is that true, girl? You trust this king?" Did she? Geraldine thought about the conversation in the study. The way King Marvin had crouched down to her level, had looked at her like she mattered, had gotten furious on her behalf when he learned about the rejection. "I think," Geraldine said slowly, "he's the first person in authority who's ever asked me how I feel instead of telling me how I should feel." I think he actually cares. And I think if we don't tell him the truth now, nothing will ever change. Tanya was quiet for a long moment. Then she began to talk. She talked about winters where 3 Omegas died from cold-related illnesses because the servant quarters had no heat. She talked about working through broken bones because there was no medical care and stopping meant losing their place in the pack. She talked about food rationing, how Omegas ate last and least, how they were expected to survive on scraps while preparing feasts for ranked wolves. King Marvin wrote it all down, his expression growing darker with every revelation. When Tanya finished, there were tears on her weathered cheeks. "Thank you," King Marvin said quietly. "Your honesty takes courage. I promise you, things are going to change." Tanya stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Your Majesty? One more thing." "Yes? There's a room, in the basement, where they send Omegas who cause problems, who talk back or work too slowly or make mistakes." Her voice had gone very quiet. "We call it the correction room. You should know about it." King Marvin's pen stopped moving. "What happens in this correction room?" But Tanya had already left, the door closing softly behind her. The silence in the library was deafening. "Geraldine," King Marvin's voice was deadly calm. "Do you know what she's talking about?" Geraldine's mouth had gone dry. Yes, Your Majesty. Have you been there?" The memory flashed dark, cold, the smell of mildew and fear. 3 days locked in darkness after she'd accidentally broken one of Beth's favorite vases. No food, no water, just darkness, and the certainty that no one cared if she lived or died. "Once," she whispered, 2 years ago." King Marvin stood abruptly. "Show me." "Your Majesty, I don't think." "Show me." It wasn't a request. The basement of Silverpine Manor was a maze of storage rooms and forgotten spaces. Geraldine led King Marvin through the dimness, his 2 guards following silently behind. They reached a door at the very end of a corridor. Heavy wood. A lock on the outside, no handle on the inside. "Here," Geraldine said, her voice barely audible. King Marvin tried the door. Locked. He looked at one of his guards, who produced a key ring and began trying different keys. "Your Majesty!" Owen Kane's voice echoed down the corridor. He appeared, slightly out of breath, his face flushed with anger. "What are you doing down here? This area is off limits." "By whose authority?" King Marvin didn't turn around. "By pack authority. These are private spaces." "There are no private spaces when I'm investigating systematic abuse." The lock clicked. King Marvin pushed the door open. The smell hit them first. Mildew and waste and old fear. The room was small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet. No windows, no furniture. Just bare stone walls, and a floor covered in old straw that hadn't been changed in months. On one wall, scratches, tally marks, someone counting days. King Marvin stepped inside, and when he turned back to face them, his eyes were blazing gold. "How long?" His voice was barely controlled. "Do you typically keep Omegas locked in here?" Owen's face had gone pale. "Your Majesty, it's not what it looks like." "How long?" "A few days. Maybe a week. It depends on the infraction." "No food?" "No water?" "Water," Owen said quickly. "We give them water. Obviously. We're not monsters." "Aren't you?" King Marvin stepped out of the room and closed the door with a control that was somehow more terrifying than if he'd slammed it. "You lock Wolves pack members who are supposed to be under your protection in a room barely bigger than a closet, in complete darkness, with minimal food and water. As punishment for what? Working too slowly? Making mistakes?" "With respect, Your Majesty." Owen's voice had taken on a sharp edge. "You don't understand how Silverpine operates. These wolves need discipline. Structure. Without consequences they'd what? Realize they're being treated like prisoners instead of pack members?" Owen's jaw clenched. "Every pack has its own methods of maintaining order. You can't expect us to." "I can expect you to follow pack law." King Marvin was directly in front of Owen now, and though Owen was tall, the king seemed to tower over him. "And pack law is very clear about what constitutes abuse. This," he gestured to the door, "is abuse. This entire system is abuse. And it ends today. You can't just I can. I am. King Marvin turned to his guards. I want this room sealed. No one enters it except to document evidence. And I want every Omega in this pack moved to proper quarters by tonight. Guest rooms, empty warrior barracks. I don't care where, but not the servant quarters. Not anymore. Your Majesty. Owen's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. You're overstepping. You can't just come into a pack and overturn centuries of tradition. Watch me. King Marvin moved past Owen, then paused. Oh, and Beta Cain? I'm going to need to speak with you privately later. I have some questions about your personal conduct, particularly regarding mate bonds and rejection papers. Owen's face went from pale to ashen. King Marvin's eyes found Geraldine. Come, we have more interviews to conduct. As they walked away, Geraldine glanced back at Owen. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Anger? Betrayal? Fear? And threaded between them, that golden mate bond pulsed with his emotions, confusion, rage, and something that might have been regret. But she didn't care. For the first time in her life, someone was fighting for her. And it felt like the world was finally starting to shift in the right direction. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, King Marvin had interviewed 12 Omegas. 12 stories of systematic neglect, cruelty disguised as tradition, and suffering normalized to the point of invisibility. Geraldine sat beside him through all of it, watching as he carefully documented every word, every hesitation, every tear. He never rushed them, never dismissed their pain, never suggested they were exaggerating or being dramatic. He simply listened, and with every story, the fury in his storm-gray eyes grew. That's the last one for today, he said after the final Omega. A young male named Brian Chase, who'd only been with Silverpine for 6 months, left the library. King Marvin set down his pen and rubbed his temples. 13 interviews, 13 different wolves, and every single story matches. What did you expect, Your Majesty? Geraldine asked quietly. She'd brought him tea an hour ago, a habit she couldn't quite break. Needing to be useful, and he'd actually thanked her for it like an equal. Honestly, I hoped I was wrong. He looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. I hoped the reports I'd received were exaggerated, that maybe it was just 1 or 2 disgruntled wolves making accusations. But this, he gestured to his notebook, pages filled with accounts of abuse. This is institutional. This is how Silverpine operates. And that means Alpha Blake either knows and approves, or he's so negligent he doesn't know what's happening in his own pack. Either way, it's unacceptable. What happens now? Geraldine asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. King Marvin stood, moving to the window. The pack grounds were visible below wolves going about their evening routines, completely unaware that their world was about to change. Now I confront Alpha Blake. Officially, with evidence he can't dismiss or explain away. He turned to look at her. And then I make some very difficult decisions about Silverpine's future. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the royal guards entered. Your Majesty, Beta Owen Cain is outside. He's requesting a private audience. He says it's urgent. King Marvin's expression hardened. Does he now? How convenient. He looked at Geraldine. You don't have to stay for this. In fact, I'd prefer if you... I want to stay. The words were out of her mouth before she could think them through. Please, Your Majesty. I need to hear what he has to say. King Marvin studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But if at any point you want to leave, you leave. Understood? Yes, Your Majesty. Send him in, King Marvin told the guard. Owen Cain entered the library like a man walking into battle. His posture was rigid, his jaw set, his eyes flickering between King Marvin and Geraldine with an emotion she'd never seen before. Was that jealousy? Your Majesty, Owen bowed, but there was something perfunctory about it. Thank you for seeing me, Beta Cain. King Marvin didn't sit, didn't offer Owen a seat. You said this was urgent. Speak. Owen's hands clenched at his sides. I need to understand your intentions regarding Silverpine Pack. The rumors spreading through the manor are concerning. Some wolves are saying you plan to dissolve our pack entirely, strip Alpha Blake of his position, Install royal oversight. Those aren't rumors, King Marvin said calmly. Those are possibilities I'm actively considering. The color drained from Owen's face. Your Majesty, with respect, that would be catastrophic. Silverpine has existed for over 200 years. We have history, traditions, a way of life that violates pack law. King Marvin's voice was like ice. Traditions that involve locking pack members in basement rooms as punishment. History built on the backs of wolves you've systemically degraded and dehumanized. We maintain order. You maintain cruelty. King Marvin moved closer to Owen, and despite Owen being beta powerful, strong, dangerous, he actually took a step backward. I've spent the entire day interviewing wolves who are terrified to speak honestly because they know the consequences, who work themselves to exhaustion, for no pay, no recognition, no basic dignity, who die in your care, and no one even bothers to count them. Every pack has omegas every pack that treats omegas the way Silverpine does is breaking the law. King Marvin's eyes flashed gold. And I'm done pretending those laws are optional. Owen's jaw worked, fury and fear warring on his face. So that's it? You've decided we're guilty based on the word of a handful of disgruntled omegas who told the truth. King Marvin's voice dropped to something dangerous. I've seen the correction room. Beta Cain. I've documented 13 separate accounts that all align perfectly. I've watched you and your alpha pretend this is about tradition, when it's actually about power and control. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. King Marvin cut him off. I understand that you're scared. Your pack's way of life is ending. Your position is threatened, and you're desperately trying to salvage something from the wreckage. He moved even closer to Owen. But here's what you need to understand, Beta Cain. I don't care about your excuses. I don't care about your traditions. I care about pack law, and the wolves suffering under your authority. And nothing you say will change my mind about what needs to happen here. Owen's eyes darted to Geraldine, and something ugly twisted his features. This is about her, isn't it? King Marvin went very still. Excuse me, Geraldine. Owen's voice had taken on a sneer. You've decided to destroy an entire pack because you feel sorry for one pathetic omega who— Choose your next words very carefully, King Marvin said, his voice barely above a whisper. Because depending on what comes out of your mouth, I might forget I'm a civilized wolf. But Owen was past caring. The pressure of the investigation, the threat to everything he knew, the confusion of his own emotions, it all came pouring out in words meant to wound. She's nothing, Your Majesty. A weak, useless omega who can barely shift. I rejected her because mating with her would have destroyed any respect I've built in this pack. And now she's gotten your attention probably by playing the victim, crying about how hard her life is, and you're letting your sympathy cloud your judgment. Geraldine felt each word like a physical blow, but before she could respond, King Marvin moved. One moment he was standing 5 feet away from Owen. The next, he had Owen slammed against the bookshelf, his hand around the beta's throat, his eyes blazing pure gold. Let me make something absolutely clear. King Marvin's voice was barely recognizable, something primal and ancient rumbling through it. You rejected your goddess-given mate, a gift most wolves would die for, because you were too weak, too cowardly, too pathetic to see past pack politics to the person in front of you. Owen struggled, but King Marvin's grip was iron. You had a chance to choose love, loyalty, the bond the moon goddess herself created. And you threw it away because you were scared of what other wolves might think. That doesn't make you practical, Beta Cain. That makes you the weakest wolf I've ever met. Your Majesty, Owen choked out. I'm not finished. King Marvin's grip tightened fractionally. My investigation of Silverpine has nothing to do with Geraldine specifically, and everything to do with systematic abuse. But you know what? The fact that a pack could look at someone like her, someone brave enough to tell the truth when it would be easier to lie, someone strong enough to survive years of your cruelty and still have kindness left in her heart and decide she's worthless. He leaned in closer. That tells me everything I need to know about Silverpine's judgment. He released Owen, who stumbled backward, gasping. Get out, King Marvin said. And if you ever speak about Geraldine that way again, if you ever even look at her with that contempt in your eyes, I will personally ensure you never hold a position of authority in any pack ever again. Am I clear? Owen straightened, rubbing his throat, his eyes wild with rage and humiliation. Crystal. Your Majesty. He turned to leave, then paused at the door, looking back at Geraldine. You think you've won something here, he said, his voice rough. You think he's your savior, but he's the Alpha King, Geraldine. He'll get bored of his little project and leave. And you'll still be here, alone, with a pack that hates you even more than before. Was it worth it? Then he was gone. The silence in the library was crushing. Geraldine's hands were shaking. Her wolf was a confused mess inside her chest. The mate bond was still there, still connecting her to Owen, and it had flared with his rage and pain and something else. Something that felt like loss. Geraldine. King Marvin's voice was gentle again, the fury completely banked. I'm sorry you had to hear that. He's not wrong though, is he? She looked up at him, tears burning behind her eyes. You're going to leave eventually. You're the Alpha King, you have territories to govern, other packs to oversee, and I'll still be here, in Silverpine, with everyone knowing I helped you tear apart everything they've ever known. King Marvin moved to stand in front of her. His hand reached out, hesitated, then gently lifted her chin so she was looking directly at him. What if you didn't stay? He said quietly. Her breath caught. What? What if I offered you a choice? Stay in Silverpine, after I've reformed it. New leadership, new rules, a chance to build something better. Or… He paused, as if weighing his next words very carefully. Work as my liaison for Omega welfare. Help me identify and fix problems in other packs, before they become like Silverpine. Geraldine stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. Your Majesty, I'm not qualified to. I don't have training in. You have experience. You have empathy. And you have courage. His thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. That's more valuable than any formal training. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. That pull, that inexplicable, overwhelming pull flared so intensely she could barely breathe. King Marvin felt it too, she could tell. His eyes widened fractionally, his breath caught. Your Majesty, she whispered. What is this? This connection between us. I can feel it. Ever since you arrived, I've felt something, and I don't understand. I need to tell you something, he said, his hand still cupping her face like she was something precious. Something I should have told you yesterday, but I was afraid. I'm still afraid. Tell me what. He took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. True mates are rare. Most wolves never find them, they find compatible mates, chosen mates, bonds built on respect and affection. But true mates? Bonds written by the moon goddess herself, before you were even born? Those are once in a lifetime. Maybe once in several lifetimes. Geraldine's heart was hammering so hard, she thought it might break through her ribs. I've lived a long time, Geraldine. Longer than most wolves. I've waited, searched, hoped for a true mate. And I'd accepted that maybe the goddess didn't have one planned for me. His eyes held hers, storm gray meeting her own brown ones. Then I came to Silverpine, and I felt it. That pull, that recognition, like my soul was a compass, and it had finally found north. But I'm mated to Owen, Geraldine heard herself say, even though every fiber of her being was screaming something different. The bond is still, is it? King Marvin's voice was gentle but insistent. Because from what I understand, he rejected you, gave you papers to sign severing the bond, and mate bonds. They can be overridden by true mate bonds. If a stronger, more fundamental connection exists, the lesser bond fades away. Are you saying? I'm saying. His other hand came up to frame her face, holding her like she was the most important thing in the world, that I think the moon goddess made a mistake giving you to Owen Kane first. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe she was testing him, giving him a chance to prove himself worthy, and he failed. But I'm Omega, Geraldine whispered, the old pain flaring. You're the Alpha King. How could we possibly be? What if you're not? The question hung in the air like lightning about to strike. Geraldine blinked. What? What if you're not Omega? What if you've been suppressed your entire life, kept weak and small and powerless because this pack needed someone to look down on? What if your true rank is something else entirely, and no one bothered to look close enough to see it? The world tilted. That's impossible. I've been Omega since I presented at 13. I can barely shift. I have no dominance, no power, because you've been starved, overworked, and psychologically beaten down for a decade, King Marvin said firmly. I've seen it before, Geraldine. Wolves who present as Omega, because their environment suppressed their true nature. Given proper care, proper nutrition, proper training, they transform into what they were always meant to be. He leaned closer, and she could feel his breath against her face. Let me take you to my pack, doctor. Let me have you properly evaluated, not by someone who's biased, not by someone who benefits from keeping you weak. Let me prove to you that you're so much more than Silverpine has ever allowed you to be. And if you're wrong? Her voice broke. If I really am just Omega? Then you're an Omega who deserves respect, dignity, and the chance to live without fear. And I'll still want you beside me. Because rank has never been what matters. You matter. The person you are, the strength you've shown, the truth you've fought for. His forehead touched hers, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. Sign Owen's papers, Geraldine. Sever the bond with a male who doesn't deserve you. And give us a chance to see what the moon goddess really intended. Tears were streaming down her face now. You're the Alpha King. I'm nobody. You're not nobody. His voice was fierce. Not to me. Never to me. And then, so quietly she almost missed it, you're everything. The door burst open. Alpha Blake stood in the doorway, his face purple with rage, Beth right behind him. Your Majesty. Blake's voice was barely controlled. I've just been informed that you've ordered my Omegas moved to guest quarters. That you've sealed the correction room. That you're threatening to dissolve my pack. This has gone far enough. King Marvin straightened slowly, and when he turned to face Blake, his expression was absolutely glacial. You're right, Alpha Blake. This has gone far enough. That's why, effective immediately, I'm placing Silverpine Pack under direct royal investigation. You and your council are suspended from leadership pending a full review. And if the evidence supports what I've already documented. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You'll be stripped of your Alpha title permanently, Beth screamed. Blake went white as death, and Geraldine realized that everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. Chapter 7, Breaking Free. The Grand Hall was packed with wolves. Every member of Silverpine Pack who could walk had been summoned for an emergency gathering. Warriors lined the walls, council members huddled in anxious clusters. Omegas, all 13 of them that King Marvin had interviewed, stood together near the back, their faces reflecting confusion and cautious hope. And at the front, on the raised platform where Alpha Blake normally held court, stood King Marvin Coffey, flanked by his royal guards. Geraldine stood to his left, where he'd insisted she remain. You're part of this, he'd told her. You helped uncover the truth. You deserve to see justice done. But standing here, with hundreds of hostile eyes boring into her, Geraldine felt like she was about to be torn apart. This is unprecedented. Alpha Blake stood below the platform, his hands clenched into fists. Your Majesty, you cannot simply walk into a pack and declare martial law. I can when pack law is being systematically violated. King Marvin's voice carried effortlessly across the hall. The Treaty of Silver Moon grants me authority to intervene when packs fail to protect their members. Silverpine has failed, spectacularly. A rumble of angry voices rose from the crowd. Based on what evidence? Beta Owen Kane stepped forward, his throat still bruised from where King Marvin had grabbed him. The complaints of a few disgruntled Omegas who don't understand. 13 separate interviews, King Marvin interrupted, his tone sharp as broken glass. 13 wolves with consistent stories of abuse, neglect, and systematic dehumanization. Documentation of a correction room, where pack members are imprisoned without trial. Records showing multiple Omega deaths over the past 5 years that were never investigated or even properly reported. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Your Majesty, a council member, Don Byers. Geraldine recognized him, spoke up. Surely you understand that Omegas require discipline. They're not like ranked wolves. They need structure, consequences. They need basic human decency. King Marvin's eyes flashed gold. I'll say whatever I want. Beth was beyond reason now. Months or years of entitlement and cruelty boiling over. She's nothing. An Omega. And you're supposed to be the Alphaking. How can you possibly? Because she's my true mate. The words dropped into the hall like a bomb. Absolute silence. Every eye in the room swiveled to King Marvin. He stood tall and unashamed, his hand reaching out to take Geraldine's. She was too shocked to pull away. Geraldine Hester is my true mate, he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, chosen by the moon goddess herself. And before anyone questions how an Omega could be mated to the Alpha King, understand this: Geraldine's rank has never been properly assessed. She's been suppressed, starved, and abused into weakness. But her true nature— he looked at her, and his eyes were soft with something that looked like wonder. Her true nature is something none of you bothered to look for because you'd already decided she was worthless. Geraldine couldn't breathe. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought everyone in the hall could hear it. He just claimed her. Publicly. In front of hundreds of wolves. You're insane. Owen's voice was hollow. She's mine. The mate bond I felt at first. You rejected her, King Marvin said flatly. You gave her papers to sever the bond because you were too weak to see her value. That rejection opened the way for her true mate bond to manifest. That's not how it works. Isn't it? King Marvin's eyebrows rose. When did you give her the rejection papers? 2 days ago. And when did I arrive in Silverpine? Owen's mouth opened and closed. The same day. King Marvin said softly. The moment you rejected her, the moment that bond began to weaken, I felt the pull that led me here. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, Beta Cain. She corrects them. He turned back to the assembled pack. I'm taking Geraldine with me when I leave Silverpine. She'll be formally evaluated by royal pack doctors. She'll be trained properly, and when her true rank manifests, whatever it may be, she'll take her place beside me as my mate and future queen. The hall erupted again, but this time Geraldine barely heard it. Queen. He'd said queen. Your Majesty, she whispered, tugging on his hand. I can't, I'm not. Not yet, he agreed quietly, speaking just to her while chaos raged around them. But you will be. I can feel it, Geraldine. Your potential. Your strength. It's buried deep, locked away by years of abuse. But it's there, and I'm going to help you find it. But what if you're wrong? The fear in her voice was raw. What if I really am just Omega? What if I can't be what you need? And King Marvin's hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. Then you'll be an Omega Queen, he said simply. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure every wolf in every pack understands that rank means nothing compared to character, courage, and heart. You've already proven you have all three. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. His smile was small but genuine. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe with anyone else. Your Majesty. A royal guard approached, his expression urgent. The pack doctor has arrived from the royal territory. He's prepared to conduct the evaluation whenever you're ready. King Marvin nodded. Good. Geraldine, this is your choice. I won't force you. If you want to stay in Silverpine, reformed Silverpine under new leadership, I'll respect that. If you want to come with me but delay the evaluation, we can wait. But if you're ready, he held out his hand. If you're ready to find out who you really are, to claim your true potential, to step into a future that terrifies and excites you in equal measure, take my hand. Trust me. Trust the moon goddess. Trust yourself. Geraldine looked at his outstretched hand, then at the pack around her, the wolves who'd tormented her, the few who'd shown kindness, the Omegas who looked at her with desperate hope. Then at Owen, still standing frozen, his face a mask of regret and fury and loss. The mate bond between them pulsed weakly, a pale shadow compared to the blazing connection she felt with King Marvin. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the rejection papers. They were crumpled, stained, barely legible. She walked to Owen and held them out. I'll sign them, she said quietly. Not because you want me to. Because I choose to. I choose something better. Owen's hand shook as he took the papers. For just a moment, his mask cracked, and she saw genuine pain in his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. Geraldine. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was a fool. Please. You were. She cut him off, not unkindly. But that's not my burden to carry anymore. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. She took a pen from the guard standing nearby and signed her name on the rejection papers with steady hands. The moment the ink dried, she felt it, the mate bond with Owen snapping like a cut rope. The golden thread that had connected them dissolved into nothing, leaving behind only emptiness. But that emptiness lasted less than a heartbeat, because immediately, powerfully, overwhelmingly, a new bond flared to life. This one was different, stronger, deeper, more fundamental than anything she'd felt with Owen. It was platinum, not gold. Diamond, not thread. It was a connection that felt like it had existed since before she was born, just waiting for the right moment to activate. Her wolf howled with recognition and joy. Mate. True mate. Ours. Geraldine's legs gave out, but King Marvin was there, catching her, holding her steady as the bond settled into place. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you, and I'm never letting go. Around them, the pack watched in stunned silence as their former Omega collapsed into the arms of the Alphaking, and when Geraldine looked up at Marvin, when their eyes met and the bond sang between them with absolute certainty, she smiled. For the first time in her entire life, she felt chosen. Not in spite of what she was, but because of who she was. Take me to your pack, doctor, she whispered. I want to know. I need to know what I really am. King Marvin's answering smile was brilliant. As you wish, my queen. Chapter 8. The Stolen Legacy. The medical wing of Silverpine Manor had never been used for Omegas. It was a pristine space reserved for ranked wolves warriors, injured in training, council members with their various ailments, the Alpha family's private health concerns. Geraldine had cleaned it countless times but never imagined she'd be a patient here. Now she sat on an examination table, King Marvin standing protectively beside her, while the royal pack doctor, a middle-aged man named Roberto Goldstein with kind eyes and gentle hands, prepared his equipment. Your Majesty, Roberto said, his voice carrying the faint accent of someone who'd traveled extensively. I want to be clear about what this evaluation entails. We'll be conducting a series of tests, blood work, physical examination, and most importantly, a deep scan of her wolf essence. Wolf essence? Geraldine asked nervously. Your inner wolf, Roberto explained, pulling on medical gloves. Every wolf has one, but sometimes, especially in cases of prolonged trauma, malnutrition, or systematic suppression, the wolf can be dormant, locked away. The essence scan will tell us if that's what's happened with you. And if it has? King Marvin's hand rested on Geraldine's shoulder, warm and reassuring. Then we can begin treatment to awaken it properly. Specialized nutrition, controlled shifting exercises, therapeutic interventions. Roberto smiled at Geraldine. I've worked with dozens of suppressed wolves over the years. The transformation can be remarkable. How long does it take? Geraldine asked. Depends on the severity of suppression. Weeks to months, typically. But the first signs usually appear within days once we begin treatment. He moved closer with a syringe. Let's start with blood work. I need to check your nutrient levels, hormone balance, and a few other markers. The blood draw was quick and painless. Roberto labeled the vials with practiced efficiency, then pulled out a device Geraldine had never seen before, a smooth crystal sphere about the size of an orange, mounted on an ornate metal base. This is an essence scanner, he explained, seeing her confused expression. Ancient technology, passed down through royal pack doctors for generations. When I activate it, and you place your hand on it, it will read your wolf essence and display your true nature. It can tell rank? King Marvin asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Rank, power level, any suppression or blockages, even hereditary traits. Roberto adjusted the device. It's completely harmless, though some wolves report feeling strange sensations during the scan. He activated the sphere. It began to glow with a soft blue light. Whenever you're ready, Miss Hester, place your hand on top. Geraldine's hand trembled as she reached out. King Marvin's grip on her shoulder tightened supportively. Whatever it says, he murmured. You're still you. Still brave. Still worthy. Nothing changes that. She took a breath and pressed her palm against the crystal sphere. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blue light flared brilliant white, so bright that Geraldine had to close her eyes against it. Heat rushed through her body, not painful, but intense, like standing too close to a fire. Her wolf, usually a quiet presence in the back of her mind, suddenly surged forward with a force that took her breath away. "Awake," it howled. "Finally awake. See us. Know us." The light shifted colors: blue, green, gold, silver, cycling through a spectrum faster than Geraldine could track. The sphere began to hum, a low vibration that she could feel in her bones. "Roberto?" King Marvin's voice was sharp with concern. "What's happening? Is this normal?" I don't know, Your Majesty." Roberto was staring at the device with wide eyes. "I've never seen it react this way. The color cycling, the intensity." The sphere suddenly pulsed with pure silver light, then went dark. Geraldine pulled her hand back, gasping. Her whole body was tingling, and her wolf was thrashing inside her consciousness, more active than it had been in years. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Did it break?" Roberto was examining the device, his expression caught between confusion and awe. "It didn't break. It completed the scan. But the reading." He pulled out a small screen that had emerged from the base of the device. His eyes widened as he read it. "This can't be right," he whispered. "Roberto." King Marvin's tone was a command. "What does it say?" The doctor looked up, his face pale. "Your Majesty, according to this scan, Miss Hester isn't Omega. She never was." Geraldine's heart stopped. "What?" "The scan shows massive suppression, layers upon layers of it. Malnutrition, psychological trauma, and something else." He squinted at the screen. "Some kind of intentional blocking? Like her wolf was deliberately weakened when she was young." "Intentional?" King Marvin's voice went dangerously soft. "Someone did this to her on purpose?" "It's the only explanation for this pattern. Natural suppression doesn't look like this. It's messy, inconsistent. This is surgical, precise. Someone with knowledge of wolf physiology deliberately stunted her development." Geraldine felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "But who would? Why would? What's her true rank?" King Marvin demanded. Roberto hesitated, looking at the screen again like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Alpha," he finally said. "She's Alpha ranked. Not just Alpha, the scan shows hereditary markers consistent with Alpha bloodlines, strong ones." The room spun. "Alpha. She was Alpha. That's impossible," Geraldine heard herself say. "I don't have Alpha parents. My mother was Omega. My father left before I was born." "Your mother told you she was Omega?" Roberto asked gently. "Everyone told me. The whole pack. I've always been lied to." King Marvin's voice was shaking with barely controlled fury. "You've been lied to your entire life." He turned to Roberto. "Can you determine when the blocking was done?" "Based on the scan's depth reading, I'd estimate she was between 12 and 14 years old, right around the age when wolves typically present their rank. The age Geraldine had presented as Omega. She'd been 13 years old, working in the manor kitchens, when she'd first felt her wolf stirring. She'd been excited, terrified, hopeful, every young wolf was, when they finally learned what they'd become. Then she'd tried to shift. And it had hurt. More than it should have. Like something was fighting her from the inside. When she'd finally completed the shift, her wolf had been small, weak, barely able to stand. "Omega," the pack doctor at the time had announced. "Weak presentation. She'll need to serve to earn her keep." And Geraldine had accepted it. Had believed it. Had built her entire identity around being the lowest of the low. "Someone blocked me," she whispered, the truth settling into her bones like ice. Someone looked at a 13-year-old girl and decided to destroy her future. Not just someone. King Marvin's eyes were blazing gold. Someone with knowledge, resources, and access to you during a vulnerable time. Someone in this pack. Someone in a position of authority. They all went silent, the implications hanging heavy in the air. "The pack doctor who evaluated me," Geraldine said slowly. "He died 5 years ago. Old age. Convenient." King Marvin's jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. "And who else would have been present during your presentation? Who would have had reason to want you weakened?" Geraldine's mind raced through memories she'd buried. The Alpha's wife had been alive then, before she'd died of illness. She'd been there when Geraldine presented, watching with cold eyes. And Beth. Beth had been 8 years old, already showing signs of Alpha dominance, already the golden child everyone adored. "Your Majesty," Roberto said carefully, "there's something else the scan revealed. Miss Hester's hereditary markers. They're not just strong, they're pure. Unusually so. That kind of purity typically only appears in ancient bloodlines. Royal bloodlines." King Marvin went very still. "Explain." "The first wolves, the original packs before civilization, they had what we call pure essence. No dilution, no weakening through generations of mixed blood. Most modern wolves are diluted, still powerful, still wolf, but carrying traits from dozens of ancestral lines." He gestured to the screen. "Miss Hester's markers suggest her lineage has remained remarkably pure. I've only seen readings like this a handful of times, and always in wolves descended from the original pack founders." "The original founders?" King Marvin's eyes widened. "Roberto, could she be descended from the northern bloodline?" "It's possible, Your Majesty." The markers align. Geraldine looked between them, completely lost. "What's the northern bloodline?" King Marvin took her hand, his grip gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. 300 years ago, when the first Alphaking united the packs, there were 5 founding bloodlines. Most have been diluted over generations through intermarrying with other packs. But one bloodline, the northern bloodline, was thought to have died out completely. He paused. That bloodline produced some of the most powerful alphas in history. They were known for their strength, their wisdom, and their ability to unite wolves who would otherwise tear each other apart. They were legendary. "And you think I'm descended from them?" Geraldine's laugh was slightly hysterical. "I'm a servant. I've spent my whole life scrubbing floors." "You've spent your whole life having your power stolen from you," King Marvin corrected fiercely. "But that ends today. Roberto, what do we need to do to remove the blocking?" "It won't be quick," Roberto warned. "The suppression has been in place for a decade. Removing it too quickly could shock her system. We'll need to do it gradually, specialized treatments, controlled exercises to wake her wolf safely." "How long?" "Optimistically, 2 to 3 months for full removal. But she'll start feeling changes within the first week." King Marvin looked at Geraldine, and his expression was a mixture of fury at what had been done to her and fierce protectiveness. 2 to 3 months, he said. "That's how long we have to find out who did this to you and make them pay for it." "Your Majesty." A voice came from the doorway, one of the royal guards. "Alpha Blake is demanding an audience. He's heard about the medical evaluation and he's agitated." A cold smile crossed King Marvin's face. "I bet he is. Tell him I'll speak with him in 10 minutes, and make sure Beta Kane and Miss Beth Good are present as well." The guard bowed and left. King Marvin turned back to Geraldine, his hand cupping her face. "Are you ready for this? Once I confront them with what we've learned, there's no going back. Silverpine will know the truth that they've been abusing an alpha-ranked wolf for a decade. That someone in their leadership committed a crime so heinous it carries a penalty of permanent exile or death." Geraldine thought about the 13-year-old girl she'd been excited, hopeful, trusting. She thought about the decade of pain, humiliation, and grinding servitude that had followed. She thought about every time she'd been called worthless, useless, weak. And she thought about her wolf, locked away inside her for 10 years, finally stirring to life. "I'm ready," she said, and her voice was steady. "I want to know who did this, and I want them to face justice." King Marvin's smile was proud and fierce. "That's my queen." He offered her his arm. Formal and respectful. "Let's go get your answers." As they walked toward the confrontation, Geraldine felt it a stirring deep inside, like something long dormant, finally beginning to wake. Her wolf was coming back, and when it fully emerged, everyone who'd hurt her would understand exactly what they'd created. Not a broken Omega, an Alpha with a decade of rage to unleash. Chapter 9, The Guilty Revealed. The Grand Hall had been hastily reassembled for what King Marvin had called a matter of criminal investigation. Alpha Blake stood at the center, his face ashen. Owen Kane flanked him on one side, jaw clenched. Beth Good stood on the other, her earlier hysteria replaced by a cold wariness that made Geraldine's skin prickle. The pack had gathered again, fewer this time, only high-ranking wolves and those directly involved in pack governance. And the Omegas. King Marvin had specifically requested all 13 Omegas be present. Whatever witnesses this, he'd said grimly, needs to see it. Geraldine stood beside King Marvin on the platform. And for the first time in her life, she stood tall, not hunched, not trying to make herself smaller. The truth of what she really was, what she'd always been, was settling into her bones like molten iron, forging something new. Your Majesty. Alpha Blake's voice carried a note of desperation. I don't understand why we've been summoned like criminals. If this is about the Omega situation, I've already assured you we'll implement whatever reforms. This isn't about reforms. King Marvin's voice cut through the hall like a blade. This is about a crime. A crime committed approximately 10 years ago. Against a young wolf. In this pack. A crime that carries the penalty of permanent exile or execution under pack law. Nain. The hall went deathly silent. What crime? Blake asked, though his eyes flickered nervously to Geraldine. The deliberate suppression of a wolf's true rank. King Marvin let the words hang. Specifically, the blocking of an alpha-ranked wolf's essence during their presentation, forcing them into a false Omega status for a decade. Gasps erupted throughout the hall. That's... Owen shook his head. That's not possible. Rank suppression requires specialized knowledge, access to rare compounds, and opportunity, King Marvin finished. Opportunity to access the victim during their vulnerable presentation period. Opportunity to administer the blocking agent without suspicion. He turned his storm-gray eyes directly on Alpha Blake, who was present during Geraldine Hester's rank presentation 10 years ago. Blake's face went from ashen to gray. I don't remember. That was a decade ago, Your Majesty. There have been dozens of presentations since. Try harder. King Marvin's voice was ice. According to pack protocol, rank presentations for children without living parents are witnessed by the Alpha, the pack doctor, and at least one council member. Who was there? I was, Blake admitted. And the pack doctor, Harold Morrison. He's been dead for 5 years. And my wife was there. She died 8 years ago. Anyone else? Blake hesitated. My daughter was there, Beth. She was only 8 years old at the time, but she was training to understand pack hierarchy and I was learning. Beth burst out, her voice shrill. Father wanted me to see how presentations worked so I'd understand rank determination when I eventually took a leadership role. I didn't do anything wrong. No one has accused you yet, King Marvin said mildly, but his eyes were sharp. Tell me, Miss Good, do you remember Geraldine's presentation? Beth's face flushed. It was 10 years ago. I barely remember. You remember? King Marvin's voice dropped dangerously low. Because something about that day stuck with you, didn't it? Something that made a deep impression on an 8-year-old girl who was already showing signs of alpha dominance. I don't know what you're talking about. Then let me help. King Marvin pulled a small vial from his pocket, the blood sample Roberto had taken from Geraldine. This contains markers that prove Geraldine Hester is alpha-ranked. Has always been alpha-ranked. Her wolf was deliberately blocked using a compound called wolven suppressor, a rare substance that requires both knowledge and resources to obtain. He held up the vial to the light. Wolven suppressor leaves traces in the victim's blood for years. My doctor found those traces. We know what was done. Now we need to know who did it. This is absurd. Alpha Blake's voice was rising. You're accusing someone in my family of what? Poisoning a child? Based on blood tests and speculation? Based on evidence, King Marvin corrected. And testimony. He gestured to the doorway. Nora Woods entered, the kind attendant who'd brought Geraldine clothes the first night. She walked with her head high, but Geraldine could see the tremor in her hands. Nora served as a junior attendant in the Alpha's household 10 years ago, King Marvin explained. She was present in the manor during Geraldine's presentation period. Nora, please tell everyone what you told me this morning. Nora took a breath, her eyes finding Geraldine's across the hall. When she spoke, her voice was steady. 2 days before Geraldine's presentation, I was cleaning the Alpha's private study. I found a bottle hidden in the back of a locked drawer. The drawer had been left open by accident. The bottle was labeled Wolven Suppressor. I didn't know what it was, but it frightened me. That kind of substance shouldn't be in a private home. That proves nothing, Blake shouted. Suppressors have legitimate uses: medical treatments, behavioral therapy, for adults, King Marvin cut in, not for children during presentation. Continue, Nora. I mentioned it to the head of household staff, Nora said quietly. She told me to forget I saw it, that it wasn't my concern. The next day, the bottle was gone from the drawer. And when was Geraldine's presentation? The day after that. The implications settled over the hall like a shroud. You're building a case on circumstantial evidence, Owen said, but his voice lacked conviction. A bottle that may or may not have been suppressor. A timing coincidence. Nothing concrete. You're right, King Marvin agreed. Which is why I had my doctor analyze Geraldine's blood more carefully. Wolven suppressor requires a carrier agent to be effective in young wolves, something to help it bond to their essence. Different families use different carriers based on availability and preference. He pulled out another document. The carrier agent found in Geraldine's blood is derived from silver bell flowers, a rare plant that only grows in specific regions. Not common. Not something you'd find in a typical pack doctor's supplies. He looked directly at Alpha Blake. But your late wife Luna Helena Todd was famous for her silver bell garden, wasn't she? She cultivated them specifically. Spent hours tending them. It was her hobby, mentioned in multiple pack newsletters from that period. Blake's face went absolutely white. You're accusing my dead wife? I'm following the evidence. King Marvin's voice was relentless. Evidence that points to someone with access to Wolven suppressor, access to silverbell extract, and motive to suppress a young alpha-ranked wolf in their pack. What motive? Blake's voice cracked. Why would Helena do something so heinous? Because she was protecting me. The voice came from Beth. Everyone turned to stare at her. Beth stood rigid, her face pale but her chin lifted defiantly. Mother did it to protect me. To protect our family. And I don't regret it. Beth, be quiet, Blake started, but she shook her head. No, Father. They already know. They've put it all together. She turned to face King Marvin, her green eyes blazing with a mixture of defiance and something that looked like grief. You want the truth? Fine. I'll give you the truth. She pointed at Geraldine. When she presented, I was there. I was 8 years old. And I'd just presented as Alpha myself 6 months earlier. I was so proud. Father was proud. Mother was proud. I was going to be someone important, someone powerful. Her voice turned bitter. Then her presentation started. And I felt it. Even at 8 years old, I could feel how strong her wolf was. Stronger than mine. Purer. She was going to overshadow me completely. Mother felt it too. I saw her face change when Geraldine began to shift. Geraldine's heart was pounding. She remembered that presentation, remembered Beth being there, watching with those calculating 8-year-old eyes. Mother took me aside after, Beth continued, her voice almost dreamlike with memory. She said that sometimes the moon goddess makes mistakes, that sometimes strong wolves emerge in the wrong places. Wolves without the breeding, the training, the family support to use their power properly. She said it would be cruel to let someone like Geraldine become alpha when she had no foundation to build on. So she blocked her, King Marvin said, his voice deadly quiet. So she saved her, Beth corrected fiercely. Mother said that being weak Omega was better than being a failed alpha. That Geraldine would be happier serving, knowing her place, rather than struggling with power she'd never know how to wield. It was mercy. Mercy? Geraldine's voice rang out across the hall, surprising even herself. 10 years of silence, of submission, of swallowing her pain, it all erupted at once. You call stealing my life, my identity, my future, you call that mercy? Beth flinched but held her ground. You were nobody. You had no family, no connections, no training. What would you have done with alpha power? You would have challenged for position and been destroyed by wolves with actual political skill. Mother saved you from that humiliation. Your mother, King Marvin's voice was shaking with barely controlled rage, committed one of the most heinous crimes in pack law. She looked at a 13-year-old child, and decided that child's potential was a threat to her own daughter, so she poisoned her, blocked her wolf, condemned her to a decade of abuse and servitude. He stepped forward, and wolves actually backed away from the fury radiating off him. And you were 8 years old. You were a child. But you're not a child anymore, are you, Beth? You're 23. And for 15 years, you've watched Geraldine suffer. Watched her clean your floors, cook your food, endure your cruelty. And you never once thought to tell the truth. Why would I? Beth's voice cracked. So she could take everything from me? So she could prove Mother was right, that she was always stronger? Always better? So I could lose my place in the pack? You never had a place. The words burst from Geraldine like a dam breaking. You built your entire life on a lie. On stolen power. On my suffering. Everything you are, everything you have, you took it from me. I earned it. Beth screamed back, all composure shattering. I trained. I studied. I worked to become someone worthy of respect. What did you do? You wallowed in self-pity and victimhood. Because your mother poisoned me. Geraldine was shaking, her wolf surging forward with a force she'd never felt before. She stole my wolf. She stole my future. She stole 10 years of my life. And you helped her by staying silent. The air in the hall had gone electric. Geraldine's skin was crawling, her wolf pressing against her consciousness with desperate urgency. Shift, it howled. Show them what they tried to destroy. Geraldine, King Marvin's voice cut through her rage, gentle but firm. Not yet. Your wolf isn't ready for a full shift yet. The blocking is still too strong. I don't care, she heard herself say. I want them to see. I want everyone to see what they tried to bury. It could hurt you. They already hurt me. Tears were streaming down her face. For 10 years, they hurt me every single day. What's a little more pain if it means the truth finally comes out? King Marvin studied her face, then slowly nodded. Then shift, he said quietly. Show them who you really are. Geraldine closed her eyes and reached for her wolf. Even through the layers of suppression, through the decade of chemical blocking, through all the psychological conditioning that told her she was weak and small and worthless, her wolf responded. It hurt. Goddess, it hurt like shifting through broken glass, like her bones were tearing apart and reforming wrong. The blocking agent fought against her, trying to keep her contained, trying to force her into the small, weak form she'd worn for 10 years. But Geraldine was done being small. She gritted her teeth and pushed. The shift completed in a burst of silver light. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. Because the wolf standing where Geraldine had been wasn't omega-sized, wasn't weak and trembling and barely able to stand. She was massive, nearly as large as an alpha male, her fur a silver white that seemed to glow in the hall's lighting. Her eyes blazed gold, true alpha gold, the color of dominance and power. But it wasn't perfect. The shift was incomplete. In places her form flickering. Unstable from the suppression still fighting against her. It was clear she was in pain, her sides heaving with the effort of holding the form. But she held it. She held it and lifted her head and howled. The sound was pure rage and grief and triumph all woven together. It echoed through the hall, through the manor, through the entire pack grounds. Every wolf in the room dropped to their knees. It wasn't voluntary. The sheer force of dominance radiating from Geraldine's true form compelled submission from everyone except King Marvin, who stood tall, his eyes blazing with fierce pride. When the howl finally ended, Geraldine shifted back, collapsing immediately. King Marvin caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. You saw, she whispered, her voice raw. You all saw. The hall was silent except for someone weeping. Alpha Blake was on his knees, tears streaming down his face. Helena, he whispered. What did you do? Beth stood frozen, all her defiance crumbled, staring at Geraldine with something that might have been horror or regret or simple shock. King Marvin's voice cut through the silence like a judge pronouncing sentence. Beth Good, you are hereby charged with conspiracy to suppress a wolf's true rank and complicity in covering up a major crime. You will be tried under pack law. If found guilty, the sentence is permanent exile from all packs. Beth's face crumbled. Your Majesty, please. I was a child when it started. You were an adult for the past 15 years, he said coldly. You made your choice. Now live with it. He looked at Alpha Blake. As for you, your wife committed the crime. But you presided over a pack that brutalized the victim for a decade. You may not have known about the initial blocking. But you knew about the abuse, the correction room, the systematic degradation. That makes you complicit. Your Majesty. Blake's voice was broken. I didn't know she was Alpha. If I'd known, would it have mattered? King Marvin's question was sharp. Should any wolf, regardless of rank, be treated the way Geraldine was treated? Or do you only care about dignity when it's someone powerful? Blake had no answer. Silverpine Pack is officially dissolved, King Marvin announced. Its members will be distributed to neighboring packs under my direct oversight. Alpha Blake Todd, you are stripped of your title permanently. Beta Owen Kane the same. He looked down at Geraldine, still cradled in his arms, exhausted from the shift but conscious. And Geraldine Hester, true name to be determined after proper bloodline investigation, you are under my personal protection. You will come with me to the Royal Pack, where you will receive proper medical treatment, proper training, and the respect you should have had from birth. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. Let Silverpine Pack be a lesson to all packs under my authority. Abuse will not be tolerated, cruelty will not be ignored, and no wolf is worthless, regardless of the rank they've been assigned. As royal guards moved forward to take Beth and Blake into custody, as the hall erupted into chaos and conversation, Geraldine looked up at King Marvin. Thank you, she whispered. His hand cupped her face gently. Thank you for being brave enough to shift, for showing them the truth. It hurt, she admitted. I know. His thumb brushed her cheek. But you did it anyway. That's what alphas do. They endure the pain to protect others, to reveal truth, to create change. I'm not sure I know how to be alpha, she said quietly. You will, he promised. We'll learn together. You, me, and the wolf they tried to destroy but couldn't. And as they left Silverpine Manor for the last time, Geraldine felt her wolf battered, suppressed, but finally awake purr with satisfaction. Justice had been served. Now came the transformation. Chapter 10, The Alpha Queen. 3 months had passed since Silverpine Pack dissolved. 3 months of intensive medical treatment, proper nutrition, controlled shifting exercises, and therapeutic work to undo a decade of psychological conditioning. 3 months of slowly, painstakingly removing the layers of suppression that had been wrapped around Geraldine's wolf like chains. And now, standing in the grand courtyard of the Royal Pack territory, Geraldine barely recognized herself. The reflection in the mirror that morning had shown someone transformed. Her frame, once thin from malnutrition, had filled out with proper muscle. Her skin glowed with health. Her hair, always dull and lifeless, now shone. But it was her eyes that showed the biggest change. They held confidence, power, and a strength that came from finally knowing who she was. Nervous? King Marvin's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing in the doorway of the courtyard pavilion, dressed in formal royal attire. In 3 months, their relationship had evolved from shocking mate bond to something deeper, more fundamental. He'd been patient as she healed. Never pushing, always supporting. They'd spent countless hours talking, training, discovering each other, and falling in love. Terrified, she admitted with a small smile. Today's the day, isn't it? The final evaluation. The day we find out if Roberto's treatment worked, if your wolf is finally free. He crossed to her and took her hands. But regardless of what happens today, regardless of what power manifests or doesn't, you're already everything you need to be. You keep saying that, because it's true. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. Power is just power, Geraldine. What matters is the person wielding it. And you're the strongest person I've ever met, not because of rank, but because of who you are. A knock at the pavilion door interrupted them. Roberto entered, carrying his equipment and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. Your Majesty, Miss Hester, are we ready to begin? Over the past 3 months, Roberto had become more than just a doctor. He'd become a friend. He'd guided Geraldine through every stage of her recovery with patience and genuine care. We're ready, Geraldine said, squeezing Marvin's hand once before releasing it. They moved to the center of the courtyard where Roberto had set up his equipment, the crystal essence scanner that had revealed the truth 3 months ago, along with various monitoring devices to track Geraldine's vitals during the evaluation. The treatment should have removed approximately 90% of the blocking agent, Roberto explained as he prepared the scanner. The final 10% will dissipate naturally over the next few weeks. But 90% should be enough for us to get an accurate reading of your true nature." He activated the crystal sphere. It glowed with that familiar soft blue light. "This time," he said gently, "I want you to not just touch the scanner. I want you to shift while in contact with it. Let your wolf fully emerge while the scan is active. It's the only way to get a complete reading." Geraldine nodded, her heart pounding. She placed her hand on the crystal and reached for her wolf. 3 months ago, shifting had been agony like tearing through concrete with bare hands. Now, after proper treatment and training, it was natural. Her wolf surged forward eagerly, and the shift flowed like water. One moment she was human, the next she was wolf, the transition so smooth it barely registered as change. The crystal sphere exploded with light, not the cycling colors from before, but pure, radiant silver white. The light was so intense that Marvin and Roberto had to shield their eyes. Geraldine felt its power flooding through her, no longer dammed up and suppressed. Her wolf, fully awake for the first time, threw back its head and howled with pure joy. The sound resonated across the entire royal pack territory. In the distance, Geraldine heard other wolves responding, hundreds of voices joining hers in a symphony of recognition. The light from the crystal began to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Then something extraordinary happened. The light shifted, forming symbols in the air above the scanner, ancient wolf runes that hadn't been seen in centuries. They hung suspended, glowing, spelling out something in the old language. Roberto gasped. "Impossible." The symbols faded, and the crystal went dark. Geraldine shifted back to human form, breathing hard but feeling more alive than she'd ever felt in her life. "Roberto." Marvin's voice was tight with anticipation. "What did the scan say?" The doctor was staring at his screen with an expression of absolute awe. His hands were shaking as he read the results. "Miss Hester isn't just alpha-ranked," he whispered. "She's... Your Majesty, according to this scan, she's descended from the original northern bloodline. Direct descent, unbroken line." "We suspected that," Marvin said. "You told us 3 months ago." "I suspected it," Roberto corrected, looking up with wide eyes. "But this scan confirms it beyond any doubt. And it tells us something else. Something that explains why Luna Helena was so threatened by her." He turned the screen so they could see. "Geraldine Hester is descended from Lyanna the Wise, the first Alpha Queen, the wolf who helped the first Alpha King unite the packs 300 years ago. She was legendary for her power, her wisdom, and her ability to unite fractured packs through sheer force of personality." Roberto's voice dropped to something reverent. "The scan shows Geraldine carries Lyanna's exact essence markers. Not diluted, not weakened. Exact. That kind of genetic consistency doesn't happen by accident. It means..." Quote. "It means what?" Geraldine asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. "It means you're not just an alpha, Geraldine. You're an alpha queen. A true one. The first one to manifest in 3 centuries. The words hung in the air like thunder. Alpha Queen. The rank above Alpha. The rank reserved for wolves who didn't just lead. They transformed, united, created something greater than themselves. Marvin was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Roberto, are you certain?" "The scan doesn't lie, Your Majesty. The runes that appeared, those were the ancient symbols for Unitor of Packs and Queen of Wolves. They only appear for wolves with Alpha Queen essence." He smiled at Geraldine. "Your mother wasn't Omega, Miss Hester. She was hiding, probably from someone or something that threatened her. She likely suppressed her own power to stay hidden, which is why you never knew your true heritage. But bloodlines like yours, they can't stay hidden forever. One way or another, the truth emerges." Geraldine's mind was reeling. Alpha Queen. Descended from Lyanna the Wise. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her origins, about her mother. "This is why Helena blocked you," Marvin said quietly, the pieces falling into place. "She must have sensed it during your presentation, not just that you were Alpha, but that you were something more, something that would have completely overshadowed her daughter. So she tried to destroy you before you could blossom. But she failed," Roberto said with satisfaction. "She delayed you, hurt you, stole years from you. But she couldn't destroy what the moon goddess created. Geraldine looked down at her hands, hands that had scrubbed floors and served meals and hidden away for a decade, hands that now trembled with power she was only beginning to understand. "What does this mean?" she asked. "Practically speaking. What does an Alpha Queen do?" Marvin stepped forward and took her hands in his, grounding her. Historically, Alpha Queens worked alongside Alpha Kings to maintain balance in the pack territories. They had their own authority, their own responsibilities. They were partners, not subordinates. His storm gray eyes held hers. "It means, Geraldine Hester, that you're not just my mate. You're my equal. And together, we're going to transform how every pack in this territory operates." "I don't know how," she whispered. "I'm still learning how to be alpha, how to lead, So we learn together." He pulled her close. "I've been ruling alone for decades, trying to change systems that have been broken for centuries. It's been exhausting, frustrating, and often futile. But with you beside me, with your perspective, your experience of what it's like to be powerless, your determination to protect those who can't protect themselves," he smiled, "we could actually change things, really change them. Make pack territories safe and dignified for every wolf, regardless of rank." "That's a lot of pressure," Geraldine said, but she was smiling too. "It is," he agreed, "but I have faith in you. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes with Alpha Queens. If she gave you this power, this heritage, this destiny, it's because you're exactly what the packs need right now." Roberto cleared his throat politely. "Your Majesty, if I may, there's traditionally a ceremony when an Alpha Queen is confirmed. A formal recognition by the packs. It hasn't been performed in 300 years, but the protocols still exist in the royal archives." Marvin's eyebrows rose. "You're suggesting we hold a coronation?" "I'm suggesting we give the packs what they need, a symbol of hope and transformation." News of Silverpine's dissolution has spread throughout the territories. Wolves everywhere are questioning their own pack structures, wondering if they've been complicit in similar abuses. Roberto gestured to Geraldine. "Imagine what it would mean to them, to Omegas, and low-ranked wolves everywhere, to see someone who was systematically abused and suppressed rise to become Alpha Queen. To stand beside the Alpha King as his equal. It would be powerful, inspiring, transformative." Geraldine's stomach flipped. "A coronation? In front of all the packs? Roberto, I'm not ready for." "You're ready," Marvin said firmly. "You've been ready since the day you told the truth in front of Silverpine Pack despite knowing the consequences. You've been ready since you shifted through suppression to show them who you really were. You've been ready since you chose to come with me instead of staying in the familiar pain." He cupped her face in his hands. "You're ready, my love, and I'll be beside you every step of the way." Geraldine looked into his eyes, this male who'd seen her at her lowest and chosen to lift her up, who'd fought for her when no one else would, who'd helped her reclaim everything that had been stolen. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do it. Let's show them what an Alpha Queen looks like." His smile was brilliant. "That's my queen." 2 weeks later, the grand amphitheater of the Royal Pack territory had been built to hold 10,000 wolves. Today, it was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from every pack in the northern territories had come: alphas, betas, council members, warriors, but also, in unprecedented numbers, omegas and low-ranked wolves who'd traveled from across the territory to witness something that had never happened in their lifetimes. The coronation of an Alpha Queen. Geraldine stood in the preparation chamber, staring at herself in the mirror, and barely recognizing the wolf looking back. She wore a gown of silver silk that seemed to shimmer like moonlight. Her hair, now lustrous and healthy, had been styled in an elegant updo, woven with small white flowers, the same silver bell flowers that had been used to suppress her, now reclaimed as a symbol of her survival. Around her neck hung a platinum collar set with moonstones, the traditional regalia of an Alpha Queen, retrieved from the royal archives where it had sat unused for 3 centuries. "You look every inch a queen," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Geraldine turned to find Nora standing there, wearing formal attendant attire. After Silverpine's dissolution, Nora had chosen to join the royal pack, and she'd become one of Geraldine's closest friends. "I feel like I'm about to faint," Geraldine admitted. "That's normal." Nora moved to adjust the flowers in Geraldine's hair with practiced efficiency. "But remember those wolves out there, especially the ones like you used to be. They need to see this. They need to see that transformation is possible, that rank doesn't determine worth, that someone can rise from nothing to everything. I didn't rise from nothing, Geraldine corrected softly. I was always something. They just convinced me I was nothing. Exactly. Nora's smile was proud. Now go remind every wolf in those stands that potential can't be suppressed forever. That truth always emerges. That the moon goddess keeps her promises, even when it takes years to fulfill them. A knock at the door announced King Marvin's arrival. He entered wearing full royal regalia, black and silver robes that marked him as Alpha King, a crown of twisted silver that sat on his dark hair. He looked every inch the powerful, ancient ruler he was, until he saw Geraldine, and his face softened into something tender. You're breathtaking, he said simply. I'm terrified, she countered. You're both. He crossed to her and took her hands. But breathtaking is winning. Through the walls, they could hear the crowd, thousands of voices, the anticipation building. Are you ready? He asked. Geraldine took a breath. Thought about the 13-year-old girl whose future had been stolen. Thought about the Omega who'd scrubbed floors while believing she was worthless. Thought about every wolf still suffering under systems like Silver Pines, still believing they deserved their pain. I'm ready, she said. Let's show them what's possible. They walked together through the corridors of the amphitheater, royal guards forming an honor guard around them. The sound of the crowd grew louder with each step. Then they emerged into the arena, and the noise became deafening. 10,000 wolves on their feet, howling, cheering, celebrating. Not all of them were celebrating, Geraldine noted with practiced observation. She could see faces in the alpha sections that were tight with disapproval or anxiety. Change threatened those who benefited from the old systems. But the lower sections where omegas and low-ranked wolves sat, those wolves were on their feet, tears streaming down their faces, howling with a joy that spoke of hope long denied. Marvin led her to the center platform where the ceremony would take place. The royal pack's high priestess, an ancient wolf named Violet Collins, who served as spiritual advisor, waited with the ceremonial regalia. We gather today. Violet's voice carried across the amphitheater with surprising strength for someone so old. To witness something that has not occurred in 300 years. The recognition and coronation of an alpha queen. She turned to Geraldine. Geraldine Hester, descended from Lyanna the Wise, first alpha queen and uniter of packs, do you accept the responsibility of this rank? Do you swear to protect the powerless, to speak for the voiceless, to transform unjust systems into equitable ones? Geraldine's voice rang out clearly. I do. Do you swear to work alongside your mate, the Alpha King, as equal partners in governance, to check his power as he checks yours, to build something greater together than either could alone? I do. Do you swear to remember where you came from, to never forget what it feels like to be powerless, to be abused, to be told you're worthless, to let that memory fuel your compassion rather than your bitterness? This question wasn't traditional, Geraldine knew. Violet had added it specifically for her. I swear it, Geraldine said, her voice thick with emotion. I will never forget. And I will never let another wolf suffer what I suffered if I have the power to prevent it. Violet smiled and turned to the crowd. Then, by the authority granted to me by the moon goddess herself, by the ancient laws that bind our packs, by the wisdom of those who came before, and the hope of those who come after, she lifted a second crown, platinum, more delicate than Marvin's but no less powerful, set with moonstones that seemed to glow with their own light. I name you Alpha Queen, protector, leader, partner. May your reign be long, your wisdom deep, and your compassion endless. She placed the crown on Geraldine's head. The amphitheater erupted. Wolves howled, stamped their feet, filled the air with sound that felt like physical force. Geraldine could see omegas crying, embracing each other, celebrating not just her coronation but what it represented, proof that they weren't powerless, weren't worthless, weren't condemned to suffer forever. Marvin took her hand and raised it high. You're Alpha Queen, he shouted, his voice carrying across the crowd. Partner in governance, voice for the voiceless, proof that potential cannot be suppressed forever. The howling intensified. When it finally began to die down, Marvin gestured for silence. Geraldine has asked to speak, he announced. And as Alpha Queen she has that right. Listen well. He stepped back, giving her the platform. For a moment, Looking out at 10,000 wolves, Geraldine felt that old fear, the Omega conditioning that said she shouldn't speak, shouldn't draw attention, shouldn't think she had anything worth saying. Then she remembered who she really was. And she spoke. I was 13 years old when someone decided my potential was too threatening to allow. She began, her voice steady and clear. They poisoned me, blocked my wolf, condemned me to 10 years of serving, suffering, and believing I was worthless. The amphitheater was silent now. Every wolf listening. For 10 years I cleaned floors, I cooked meals, I endured cruelty and abuse. I was told every single day that I was nothing, that I was lucky to even have a place in the pack, that serving was all I was good for. She paused, letting the words settle. And I believed it. That's what systematic abuse does. It makes you believe the lies. It makes you think your suffering is deserved, that you're the problem, not the system. She looked out at the Omega sections, at the faces staring up at her with desperate hope. But I was wrong. And if you're sitting there right now, in whatever pack you belong to, believing you're worthless because of your rank, you're wrong too. Her voice grew stronger. Rank doesn't determine worth. Rank is just a label, one that can be wrong, can be manipulated, can be used as a weapon by those who benefit from keeping others small. What determines worth is who you are. Your courage, your compassion, your refusal to let suffering break you completely. She gestured to herself. I stand here today, not because I was always strong, but because I refused to stay broken. Not because I was special, but because King Marvin saw past the lies to the truth. Not because I earned this position, but because it was always mine, stolen from me, yes, but never truly gone. She looked directly at the high-ranking wolves in the Alpha sections. To those of you who benefit from the current systems, who've built your power on the backs of wolves you've deemed lesser, understand this. Change is coming. Not as a punishment, but as a correction. Pack law exists for a reason. The Treaty of Silvermoon was written to protect all wolves, not just the powerful ones. Her voice turned to steel. King Marvin and I will be reviewing every pack in these territories. We'll be investigating complaints. We'll be enforcing laws that have been ignored for too long. And packs that refuse to reform, that continue to abuse and exploit their members, they'll face the same fate as Silverpine. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but she wasn't finished. But to those of you who've been suffering in silence, to the Omegas, the low-ranked wolves, the ones who've been told you don't matter, I want you to know this. You have value. You have worth. You have rights under pack law, and I will personally ensure those rights are protected. Her voice softened. I know it's hard to hope when hope has been beaten out of you. I know it's terrifying to speak up when silence has kept you safe. But I'm standing here today as proof that transformation is possible. That truth emerges, even when it takes 10 years. That the moon goddess keeps her promises. She lifted her chin, the platinum crown catching the light. I'm your Alpha Queen. And I will fight for you the way King Marvin fought for me. You are not alone anymore. You are not invisible. You are not worthless. She paused, letting the final words ring out across the amphitheater. You are wolves. You are pack. You are mine. And I protect what's mine. The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then the amphitheater exploded with sound howls, cheers, wolves on their feet shouting her name. The noise was overwhelming. Physical, like being wrapped in the approval and hope of thousands. Marvin stepped forward and wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. That, he murmured in her ear, was perfect. I meant every word, she said. I know. That's why it was perfect. They stood together on the platform, Alpha King and Alpha Queen, partners, mates, equals, while the crowd celebrated below them. And in the back sections, where 13 specific wolves sat together, Geraldine saw them, the Omegas from Silverpine, the ones she'd shared that cramped servant quarters with, the ones who'd survived the correction room, the ones who'd thought they'd die as Omegas, unrecognized and unvalued. They were crying, embracing each other, howling with joy. Because if Geraldine could transform from abused Omega to Alpha Queen, then anything was possible. 6 months later, Geraldine stood in what had become her favorite place in the royal territory, a garden she'd designed herself, filled with plants from every pack in the territory. It was a living symbol of unity, of different strengths coming together to create something beautiful. There you are. Marvin's voice came from behind her. I should have known you'd be hiding in the garden again. I'm not hiding, I'm thinking. She turned to smile at him. Roberto sent the final report on the Omega welfare investigations. 23 packs are now in full compliance with pack law. 15 more are undergoing reforms, and only 4 are resisting completely. We'll deal with those 4, Marvin said, coming to stand beside her. One way or another. But 23 packs reformed in 6 months? That's remarkable progress. It's not enough. It's a start. He pulled her into his arms. Rome wasn't built in a day, love. Neither is systemic change. But we're building it. Together. She leaned into his embrace, breathing in his scent, feeling the mate bond humming between them, platinum strong, unbreakable, perfect. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Helena hadn't blocked me? She asked quietly. If I'd presented as Alpha at 13 like I should have? Sometimes, he admitted. But then I remember that you wouldn't be who you are now. You wouldn't have the empathy, the understanding, the fire to change things. Your suffering shaped you, Geraldine. It shouldn't have happened, and Helena deserves every punishment she received, but it did happen. And you've transformed that pain into purpose. He tilted her chin up to look at him. You're exactly who the packs need, who I need, and I wouldn't change a single thing about you. Even the parts that are still healing? The nightmares? The moments when I forget I'm queen and start to act like a servant? Especially those parts, he said firmly. Because they remind us both where you came from. They keep you compassionate. Keep me humble. Keep us focused on what actually matters. A messenger wolf approached, bowing respectfully. Your Majesties, the council is assembled for this afternoon's session. They're ready when you are. Geraldine took a breath, squared her shoulders, and felt the weight of the crown on her head no longer foreign, no longer frightening but right. Let's go change some more laws, she said with a smile. As they walked together toward the council chambers, Alpha King and Alpha Queen, partners in every sense, Geraldine thought about that 13-year-old girl who'd had her future stolen. I'm sorry it took so long, she thought. I'm sorry for every year you suffered, but I promise you this. I'm making sure no other young wolf goes through what you did. Your pain has purpose. Your survival has meaning. And your future. She looked at Marvin, at the life they were building, at the changes they were creating. Your future is more beautiful than you ever imagined. Her wolf, fully awake and powerful, howled in agreement. And Geraldine Hester Alpha Queen, uniter of packs, protector of the powerless, walked forward into her destiny with her head held high and her heart finally whole. Epilogue. 1 year after coronation. The memorial garden was complete. Geraldine stood before the central monument, a massive stone carved with names. Hundreds of names. Every Omega who died under abusive pack systems over the past century, documented and remembered. At the top, in larger letters, Lyanna the Wise, first Alpha Queen, uniter of packs. At the bottom, they told us we were nothing. We proved them wrong. It's beautiful, Marvin said softly, his hand finding hers. They would be proud of you. I hope so. Geraldine traced one name with her finger, a young Omega from Silverpine, who died 2 winters before Geraldine arrived. I hope they know their suffering wasn't meaningless, that we're building something better. Behind them, the sound of young wolves laughing echoed across the garden. Geraldine turned to see a group of Omega children, now simply called service-ranked in the new terminology, playing freely, supervised by caring adults, well-fed and healthy and safe. One of them, a little girl with silver hair, looked up and saw Geraldine watching. The child's face lit up, and she ran over. Your Majesty, the girl said breathlessly. Is it true? Were you really Omega before you became queen? Geraldine crouched down to the child's level. I was. For 10 years. The girl's eyes went wide. And now you're the most powerful wolf in the territories? Now I'm exactly who I was always meant to be, Geraldine corrected gently. The power was always there. They just tried to hide it. But it couldn't stay hidden forever. Will I be powerful someday? The girl asked hopefully. You're already powerful, Geraldine said. You just don't know it yet. But you will. I promise you, in this new world we're building, every wolf gets the chance to discover their true potential. Including you." The girl beamed and ran back to her friends. Marvin pulled Geraldine to her feet and into his arms. "You're good at this. The queen thing. I'm learning." She smiled up at him. "We both are. Together," he said, kissing her forehead. "Always together," she agreed. And as the sun set over the memorial garden, painting the sky in shades of silver and gold, Geraldine felt her wolf settle peacefully. They'd come so far. From broken Omega to Alpha Queen, from hopeless to hopeful, from victim to victor. The journey had been long and painful, but it had been worth it. Every single step. And so, dear viewers, Geraldine's journey comes to an end, from Omega Servant to Alpha Queen, from rejected to revered, from broken to unbreakable. But before you go, I have a question that I hope will stay with you. What part of yourself have you been suppressing because someone convinced you it was too much, too powerful, too threatening to those around you? Geraldine spent 10 years believing she was worthless, because that's what she was told, but the truth was always there, waiting to emerge. What truth about yourself is waiting to emerge? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I genuinely want to know. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that your potential can be suppressed but never destroyed, please show your support by hitting that like button. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in transformation. You are more than they told you. Always have been. Always will be.